Hiraku Machio wakes up in his rustic log cabin from a dream about his past life. He walks out of his bedroom and greets his maid, casually mentioning that he would prefer if she stopped calling him master. He heads into the kitchen where another horned maid is dealing with a slime in a clay pot, and then steps outside to stretch his arms under the bright blue sky. A white-haired elf and a winged angel girl greet him, chatting happily about their daily patrols and the peaceful life they all share on the farm. Hiraku reflects on how he never could have imagined living such a wonderful, cozy life back when he was trapped in a hospital bed. In his previous life, Hiraku suffered through immense hardships, dealing with backstabbing betrayal and a terminal illness that ultimately claimed his life at the young age of 39. After his death, his soul is transported to a dark cosmic void where he comes face to face with the god of the world. The divine being explains that Hiraku's miserable life was actually partly due to a mistake on his end, so as an apology and atonement, he offers Hiraku the chance to be reincarnated in a new world. God promises to give him a completely healthy body free of any illnesses, and asks if Hiraku has any specific requests for his second life. Hiraku remembers watching television shows about farming while stuck in the hospital, and asks if he can live a peaceful life as a farmer far away from civilization. God agrees to this request and, after getting permission from the god of farming, bestows Hiraku with a special power called the omnipotent farming tool. With a flash of bright light, God sends Hiraku off to enjoy his new life to the fullest. Hiraku suddenly wakes up in the middle of a dense, sun-drenched forest. He slowly stands up and raises his fists in triumph, overjoyed to finally have a healthy body that can move without any pain. Realizing that he is basically dressed like a beginner villager in a video game, he decides to figure out his current situation and tests out his new power. He summons the omnipotent farming tool, which instantly materializes in his hands as a glowing golden hoe. He takes a swing at the dirt and discovers that the tool allows him to effortlessly plow through hard ground and thick tree roots without feeling the slightest bit tired. The soil it leaves behind is perfectly fluffy and ready for planting, but Hiraku knows he needs to secure water and food before he can start a farm. He wanders through the forest listening for a river, but all he can hear is the rustling of leaves. Realizing that the forest might be filled with dangerous monsters, he decides to quickly find a safe place to set up a base. He soon stumbles upon a colossal ancient tree that towers above the rest of the canopy and chooses the clearing around it as his new home. Since he could not find a river, Hiraku decides to dig a well. He attempts to use his farming tool in the shape of dowsing rods to find an underground water source, but the method proves too confusing for him to understand. He then transforms the tool into a glowing yellow shovel and starts digging a massive hole right next to the giant tree. The tool's magic allows him to dig at incredible speeds without any fatigue, but he quickly realizes he has dug so deep straight down that he cannot get out. Adapting his strategy, he uses the shovel to dig a diagonal tunnel up to the surface and miraculously strikes a water vein on his very first try. With his water supply secured, Hiraku shifts his focus to finding food. He notices that he does not feel hungry at all, which he assumes is another magical benefit of the farming tool. Instead of wandering back into the dangerous forest to forage, he decides to start clearing the area around the giant tree to prepare for his future fields. He transforms his tool into an axe to chop down a sturdy tree, expecting it to be a difficult task. However, the moment the blade strikes the trunk, a massive magical shockwave obliterates the tree in a single hit, leaving Hiraku stunned by the tool's immense power. He then shapes the tool into a hatchet and uses it to effortlessly strip the branches and peel the bark off the fallen logs. After processing a good amount of timber, Hiraku contemplates building a proper wooden hut, but he realizes he lacks the nails and adhesives needed to construct a complex building from scratch. As the sun begins to set, he panics, knowing he needs to find a light source before the forest goes completely dark. He tries to summon a flashlight or a lighter, but the tool fails to transform, leading him to realize that complex machines and non-farming items fall outside his jurisdiction. Thinking quickly, he summons a magnifying glass and uses it to focus the remaining light onto some wood shavings, successfully starting a small campfire. With the fire going, Hiraku hurriedly carves a hole into the side of the massive tree trunk to serve as a temporary shelter for the night. He sits inside his hollowed-out tree, drinking water from a wooden cup he carved, and notices that his eyesight is surprisingly sharp in the dark. Looking up at the sky, he sees two moons, confirming without a doubt that he is in a fantasy world. The next morning, Hiraku officially starts clearing out a large patch of land for his farm. He transforms his tool into a scythe and slashes away the weeds, but eventually his magical stamina runs low, and his stomach finally starts rumbling with hunger. As he pushes further into the brush, a terrifying gray rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and massive fangs suddenly lunges at him. Panicking at the sight of the beast, Hiraku frantically swings his farming tool and accidentally strikes the rabbit in the neck, killing it instantly. He feels a bit guilty about the gruesome encounter but decides to make the most of it. He butchers the giant rabbit with a summoned knife and roasts the meat over his campfire. The meat tastes incredibly wild and reeks of blood, but Hiraku is just grateful to have something edible to fill his stomach. Knowing that he needs to establish some basic hygiene facilities, he spends some time building a functional wooden toilet over a deep hole, complete with a tank and ventilation pipe. Feeling accomplished, he finally gets to work on his farm, using a silver-headed hoe to till several neat rows of soil in the clearing. He sits by his campfire that night, mentally listing all the vegetables he wants to grow, like tomatoes, potatoes, and corn. However, he quickly realizes a major flaw in his plan since he does not have a single seed to plant in the freshly plowed dirt. Assuming he will just have to forage for edible plants in the forest, he goes to sleep. To his absolute shock the following morning, he discovers that vibrant green sprouts have magically erupted from the soil across all his garden ridges. He guesses that the omnipotent farming tool automatically generates the crops without the need for seeds, even though the plants are growing in strange, twisted shapes. Knowing that his fields are now active, Hiraku decides he needs to protect his precious crops from the giant rabbits and other unknown monsters lurking in the woods. He uses a pickaxe and a shovel to construct a sturdy wooden log fence completely surrounding the farm, and then digs a deep trench on the outside for extra security. Over the next few days, he survives by eating the giant rabbits that foolishly try to break through his defenses, slowly getting used to the taste of the wild meat. He also shapes his tool into a watering can, which magically speeds up the growth of the sprouts whenever he waters them. With his food and resources relatively stable, Hiraku tackles his biggest project yet and manages to build a proper log cabin. He overcomes his lack of height by digging into the ground to lower the floor, stacks the notched logs securely, and uses tree bark for the roof. Moving out of the hollowed tree trunk, he sits inside his new home, incredibly satisfied with his comfortable, civilized living space. Life on the farm becomes a joyful routine for Hiraku, as he watches his mysterious crops bloom with white flowers and grow larger every day. However, his peaceful routine is interrupted when two massive, scarred black wolves appear at his fence. At first, Hiraku is alarmed by their glowing red eyes and intimidating size, but he quickly notices that they are heavily injured and making no aggressive moves toward him. Remembering how much he wanted a dog when he was a child, he decides to try and tame them. He places a wooden plank over his defensive trench and offers the wolves some leftover meat from a giant boar he recently killed. The wolves happily devour the food, and as they relax, Hiraku realizes that the female wolf has a bulging stomach and is actually about to give birth. Unsure of what to do, he brings the wolves inside his newly built log cabin to keep them safe and warm during the delivery. He sets up a bonfire near the entrance to keep the cold out and steps outside to give them space, worrying that his human presence might interfere with the process. Exhausted from the stress, Hiraku falls asleep outside the cabin. When he wakes up the next morning, he cautiously peeks inside and is overjoyed to find the mother wolf nursing a litter of 4 healthy black pups. To celebrate the successful delivery, he feeds the parents the best cuts of boar meat. Seeing how comfortable the wolves have become in his house, Hiraku decides not to kick them out and simply builds a second, improved log cabin for himself right next door. He names the male wolf Kuro and the female Yuki, and gives the 4 pups the names Kurichi, Kuroni, Kurosan, and Kuroyan. He soon discovers that the wolves are perfectly happy eating the vegetables from his garden, starting with the first batch of ripe red tomatoes he harvests. The wolves quickly become invaluable companions, helping to patrol the farm and hunt for game in the surrounding forest. Standing in his flourishing field with Kuro by his side, Hiraku gathers his crops and realizes he now needs to build a storage shed for all the vegetables. With a warm smile on his face, he looks forward to continuing his slow, peaceful, and busy farming life in this new world. High in the cosmic void, God decides to check on Hiraku to see how he is faring in his new life. He quickly realizes he made a massive mistake by dropping the innocent man completely alone into the treacherous forest of death, a place swarming with wicked monsters. God panics over his error, knowing he instructed Hiraku to sustain himself by farming in such a brutal environment. He strongly considers pulling Hiraku out of the world, but he remembers that interfering after a life has started goes strictly against the rules. God decides to leave things as they are and hopes that if Hiraku dies, his soul will return so he can formally apologize. Meanwhile, Hiraku is doing exceptionally well on his farm and continues to experiment with his magical farming tool. He discovers that he does not even need seeds to grow crops. If he simply imagines a specific plant while tilling the soil, the seeds magically sow themselves into the ground. He successfully grows a wide variety of vegetables, including potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and cabbage. He tests his theory further by aggressively thinking about eggplants and spinach while swinging his hoe, and the sprouts immediately appear. Hoping to get soybeans, he imagines bean sprouts, and within 14 days they grow into towering corn plants and mature soybean pods. Sometimes the crops grow so fast that it completely startles him. He checks on his potatoes and notices that the ones exposed to the sun have turned green. Remembering that green potatoes are poisonous, he decides to throw them away and learns to pile dirt around the base of the plants to prevent sun exposure. Realizing he lacks basic farming knowledge, he accepts that he will just have to learn everything through trial and error. Feeling incredibly grateful for his successful harvests and peaceful life, Hiraku carves 2 wooden statues of the gods, placing the one governing agriculture on the left. He sets up a small shrine and thanks them for his primitive but comfortable lifestyle. Later, he cooks a hearty stew using rabbit meat and fresh pesticide-free vegetables. He notes that draining the blood from the animals immediately after killing them makes the meat taste much better, and his wolf companions absolutely love it. However, the stew lacks any seasoning, and Hiraku desperately wishes he had some rock salt. Looking to the future, he expands his farm by planting fruit trees like apples, pears, and persimmons, fully prepared to wait the several years it will take for them to bear fruit. Life with his wolf companions keeps the crushing loneliness at bay, and he notices that the pups have grown small silver horns, which he figures is just a normal trait for dogs in this fantasy world. The wolves are extremely well behaved, waiting their turn for meals, and their incredible senses help Hiraku navigate the dense forest without getting lost. This allows him to safely explore further from his base, eventually discovering a river with a small waterfall about a 30-minute walk away. Seeing a perfect water source, he decides to dig a long canal to bring the water directly to his home. He builds a small wooden toilet at the construction site to keep things civilized and transforms his almighty farming tool into a wheelbarrow to transport materials. Since using the tool prevents him from feeling fatigue, he puts Kuro in the wheelbarrow and sprints through the forest at breakneck speed. He completely loses control and plummets off a high cliff, crashing into the ground below. Both he and Kuro survive the massive fall without a single scratch, but Hiraku quickly decides he needs to build proper roads before trying anything like that again. Back at his home base, he clears out more forest and creates new fields. He plants oilseed rape to harvest cooking oil, wheat to grind into flour for easy preservation, and sugarcane to satisfy his craving for sweets. His bean sprouts fully mature into soybeans, but he is disappointed that he cannot boil edamame because he still does not have any salt. Soon the weather turns freezing, and Hiraku spots snow on the distant mountain peaks. Knowing winter is coming, he tries to use the pelts from the giant rabbits he killed to make warm clothes, but they reek of blood and he fears they will rot, so he abandons the idea. He decides his only option is to hide in his cabin and keep the fire burning. Just then, a massive dark blue spider with white stripes drops out of the giant tree. Hiraku initially thinks it is a giant seat cushion, but he prepares to defend himself when he realizes it is a monster. However, the spider makes no aggressive moves and instead hands him a beautifully embroidered cloth made from the discarded rabbit pelts. Amazed by the spider's weaving skills and friendly nature, Hiraku names her Zabuton. Zabuton moves into the canopy of the giant tree, and in exchange for her favorite food, potatoes, she crafts high-quality items for him. She makes him a warm, fur-lined green winter coat, comfortable bedding stuffed with leaves, and thick curtains to block the freezing drafts in his cabin. Thanks to her hard work, his home becomes incredibly civilized and cozy. Winter officially arrives, blanketing the forest in snow. Hiraku stays inside with the wolves, eating hot potatoes by the fireplace. He briefly worries that heavy snowfall might collapse his wooden roof, but thankfully the snow does not pile up too much. Despite having enough food and warmth, the extreme isolation weighs heavily on his mind, and he genuinely fears he might forget how to speak. Eventually the cold eases up and spring arrives, melting the snow. Hiraku cooks a large pot of thick vegetable stew outside in the warm weather. Around this time, the four-horned wolf pups leave the farm and wander into the forest to find mates. Hiraku watches them go with a mix of pride and sadness. A few days later, they return with new partners, though some of them bear minor scratches from fighting rivals. Shortly after, Zabuton climbs down from her tree accompanied by a swarm of tiny spider babies, confirming to Hiraku that she is a female. Thrilled by his rapidly growing family, Hiraku grabs his hoe and immediately starts tilling more land to ensure he can feed everyone. While he is working, Zabuton repeatedly strikes a hanging wooden board to sound the alarm. Kuro rushes over and leads Hiraku deep into the forest to investigate the threat. They discover a young girl with long white hair and pointed ears tightly bound in Zabuton's thick webs. She is surrounded by the snarling wolves and cries out for help. Hiraku is shocked to finally hear another person's voice and quickly calls off the dogs. Suddenly, the girl breaks free from the webs, lunges at Hiraku, and bites down hard on his neck. She violently sucks his blood, and a brilliant pink magical light envelops her. In an instant, her body rapidly grows from a child into a mature young woman, and her clothes magically change to fit her adult form. Hiraku feels absolutely no pain or fatigue from the blood loss, realizing his divinely granted healthy body completely protects him. Before he can ask questions, the wolves growl at the girl, and she instantly shrinks back down into her child form out of pure fear. Hiraku calms the dogs and asks the girl if she is an enemy sent to hurt them. She angrily denies it and yells at him for setting his dogs on her, but she reluctantly admits that she actually picked a fight with the wolves first because she thought she could win. She explains that she used too much energy fighting and could no longer maintain her adult body or clothes, forcing her to suck his blood to recover. Feeling bad for her, Hiraku offers his neck again so she can fully heal. She gladly accepts, drinking more of his blood and transforming back into her adult form. She happily notes that his blood is incredibly full of vitality, implying he lives a very healthy life. Hiraku then brings her back to his farm, and the girl is completely astonished to find a thriving agricultural settlement in the middle of the savage forest. She points at the tomato plants, having never seen them before. Hiraku uses his magic tool to summon a pair of scissors and snips a fresh tomato for her to try. She takes a bite and is absolutely blown away by the sweet, juicy texture. Thrilled by her praise, Hiraku gives her a full tour of the farm, showing off his towering corn stalks and pulling massive radishes out of the dirt. Later that night, they sit by the fire inside the cabin. The girl uses her magic to analyze the vegetables and introduces herself as Lulu Lucy, a vampire researching medicinal plants. She explains that she got into a feud with some greedy nobles who wanted to steal her research, so she fled to the Forest of Death to lay low and continue her work. She is amazed that Hiraku managed to tame the terrifying beasts of the forest and asks if his farming abilities come from a magic tool. Hiraku agrees that his tool is probably magical. Fascinated by everything she has seen, Lu asks if she can stay at the farm for a while to continue her research. Without hesitating, Hiraku loudly blurts out that he wants her to stay and live with him forever. Lu is completely stunned and gets extremely flustered by the suddenness of his words. Hiraku passionately explains that he originally came to the forest to live alone, but the crushing isolation has become unbearable, and he desperately wants her to stay with him. Lu nervously asks if he is proposing to her. Hiraku freezes, realizes exactly how his words sounded, and blushes furiously. However, he refuses to back down, confirming that it is a proposal and it is exactly what he wants. He drops to his hands and knees, begging her to stay. Lu finally relents, smiles warmly, and agrees to his proposal. Overjoyed, Hiraku scoops her up and flies out into the night sky, celebrating his success while Lu screams at him to slow down. The next morning, Lu finds Hiraku working in his field of yellow flowers. She has intentionally shrunk herself back down to her child form, explaining that she did it so he will not be tempted to touch her inappropriately. Hiraku awkwardly agrees to restrain himself, just happy to finally have someone to say good morning to. They start discussing their next farming project, and Hiraku suggests growing sweet potatoes, since they are easy to preserve and they now have more mouths to feed. He casually mentions that Lu is officially the first human villager to move in, which makes her about the 30th villager overall if he counts the wolves and the spiders. Lu laughs at his ridiculous hierarchy. She then asks if they can try growing some medicinal herbs for her research. Hiraku confidently agrees, telling her that with his magical farming tool, they do not even need any seeds to get started. As Hiraku and Lulusi settle into their new life together, having her around proves to be incredibly helpful for the day-to-day operations of the farm. Lulusi easily uses her basic magic to light up the inside of his newly built wooden sheds, creating a brilliant golden glow that completely illuminates the dark space. Later that afternoon, they sit together on a log by the massive tree to enjoy a hearty meal of thick meat and freshly harvested green asparagus. As they eat from their wooden bowls, Lulusi notices the very mild flavor of the food and asks Hiraku if he prefers cooking without salt. Hiraku scratches his head and admits that he actually wants to use salt, but he simply cannot find any in the forest. Lulusi gives him a nervous stare, clearly surprised by his lack of awareness. She immediately leads him into the stone tunnels he had dug out earlier and points to a large section of the rock wall. She explains that the wall is actually made of rock salt. All he has to do is dissolve the rock in water and boil it down to get all the salt they will ever need. Hiraku realizes he was completely clueless while digging the tunnels and feels a bit embarrassed about missing something so obvious. The next morning, Lulusi wakes up in her smaller childlike form before transforming back into a beautiful adult. Hiraku tells her that he plans to check on the growth of their fruit trees today, and she eagerly agrees to join him once she gets washed up. They walk through the quiet orchard, inspecting the young saplings planted in neat mounds of dark soil. Hiraku mentions that he tried planting oranges and peaches this time and thinks about adding chestnuts to the crop rotation in the future. Lulusi smiles and says she cannot wait to see how the fruit turns out. As they sit on a wooden bench sipping hot tea with the horned wolves resting peacefully at their feet, Hiraku notes that Lulusi's herb tea is quite good, but he really craves some traditional green tea. He recalls that oolong, black, and green tea all come from the same leaves and wonders if he can figure out the processing method himself. Their peaceful afternoon is suddenly interrupted when a blonde girl with large white wings crashes into the forest clearing. She is an angel named Tia, and she immediately launches an attack on Lulusi. However, the tables quickly turn when Tia finds herself completely surrounded by the protective pack of aggressive horned wolves. The wolves easily corner her, and Tia falls to the ground in tears, begging for her life and apologizing frantically for attacking first. Lulusi just watches with a deadpan expression, noting that she has been in that exact terrifying situation before. Hiraku decides to step in and calls off the wolves to rescue the terrified angel. Tia dusts herself off and decides to prove her angelic identity by shooting a powerful cyan magic beam from her finger, completely destroying a distant target in the woods. Hiraku is thoroughly amazed by her magical prowess, but he is still confused about why an angel would attack them out of nowhere. They all head inside the rustic cabin to sit down and talk things out. Tia explains that Lulusi has a massive bounty on her head for going on a destructive rampage in a human town. Hiraku asks Lulusi about the incident, and Lulusi sheepishly admits that a noble kept forcing her to make strange medicines and drugs against her will. She got so annoyed with his constant demands that she blew up his estate to teach him a lesson. Tia scolds her for besmirching the noble's honor and causing so much trouble, but Lulusi brushes it off, claiming she went a little too far but it was mostly just an accident. The two girls continue to bicker until Tia suddenly stops and asks who Hiraku is. Lulusi blushes deeply, covers her mouth, and shyly introduces Hiraku as her husband. Tia is completely shocked to hear that Lulusi actually settled down with a human. Lulusi then turns the conversation around and asks Tia if she wants to live on the farm with them. Tia is very hesitant at first, but Lulusi insists on showing her around the property. They take Tia on an extensive tour of the lush crop fields and the massive expanding orchard. Tia is genuinely impressed by the vast amount of food they managed to grow out in the wilderness. However, the tour takes a dark turn when Lulusi proudly introduces Zabuton, the giant demon spider resting quietly in her rocky cavern. Tia takes one look at the terrifying creature and instantly faints from pure shock. She eventually wakes up lying in the dirt, completely dazed and exhausted. Lulusi simply laughs and drags her straight to the cabbage patch, declaring that it is time for the angel to do some manual labor. Tia complains that an angel shouldn't have to get her hands dirty with farm work, but Hiraku hands her a massive, vibrant green cabbage. He tears off a fresh leaf, sprinkles some of their newly acquired salt on it, and offers it to her to taste. Tia takes a bite and is blown away by the incredibly delicious fresh flavor. She completely changes her tune and agrees that growing their own food is incredibly rewarding. They spend the rest of the day harvesting huge baskets full of cabbages, celery, and ripe strawberries. By sunset, Tia is exhausted but extremely happy with the day's work. They return to the cabin and snack on the fresh strawberries. Tia admits that farming is a lot more fulfilling than she expected, and that she had a lot of fun. Lulusi immediately seizes the opportunity and begs Tia to stay permanently. Lulusi claims that her body simply cannot handle all the physical demands of living alone with Hiraku. Tia blushes fiercely, completely misunderstanding the implication, but she agrees to stay and help out. Over the next few days, Tia proves to be an incredibly hard worker. She uses her magic to help move heavy wooden logs alongside a massive stone golem, and she gathers countless baskets of vegetables from the field. However, as they look at the expanding crop rows, Tia points out that they are currently operating at maximum capacity. Hiraku agrees, noting that even if they expand the fields further, they won't have enough hands to actually harvest everything before it rots. They head over to check on the dogs and find that the pups have already grown their horn. Since the wolf family is multiplying so quickly, Hiraku decides to build a brand new massive dog area right next to the orchard to give them more space. Meanwhile, Zabuton's spiderlings have also grown significantly. Hiraku watches as a massive swarm of tiny blue spiders uses white silk parachutes to catch the wind and fly away into the sky to start their own journeys. A few spiders choose to stay behind on the farm, but the nest is definitely less crowded now. Seeing all these changes around the farm, Tia tells Hiraku that she needs to step out for a while. Hiraku assumes she is leaving them for good, but Tia promises she will return soon. She flies off into the sky, leaving Hiraku and Lulusi to manage the farm alone. A few days later, Tia returns just as she promised, but she doesn't come back alone. She brings a group of 7 high elf women with her. The elves all wear matching green and white uniforms and introduce themselves with similar names like Leah, Leaf, Lakat, Lise, Lili, Lita, and Lise. Leah, the lilac-haired leader, explains that they all share a very tragic backstory. 200 years ago, their village in the north was completely wiped out after they got dragged into a brutal human war. Since then, their race has been scattered, and these 7 women have been wandering through the dangerous woods desperately looking for a safe place to settle down and repopulate. Tia found them and suggested they move to the farm. The elves desperately bow to Hiraku and beg him to let them stay. Lulusi vouches for them, noting that high elves are known to be incredibly talented workers. Hiraku checks their ages and is surprised to learn that Leah is over 400 years old, while the youngest is around 300. Despite the crowded living situation, Hiraku agrees to let them stay as long as everyone promises to get along. The elves are overjoyed and thank him profusely for his kindness. Leah asks who else lives on the farm, so Lulusi introduces them to Zabuton and the pack of Inferno wolves. Just like Tia did, the 7 seasoned elf warriors take one look at the legendary monsters and instantly faint, collapsing onto the dirt with swirly eyes. Once they recover from the shock, Hiraku realizes they desperately need a place for the new residents to sleep. Leah mentions that the 7 of them want to live together in one big house. Hiraku quickly discovers that the elves are master builders with highly advanced construction techniques. He focuses on digging the foundation ditch, leveling the ground, and gathering timber, while the elves expertly process the lumber and fit the massive logs together. They set up a proper toilet and a garbage disposal area before assembling the main structure. In just 10 days, they successfully construct a massive, beautiful 2-story log cabin. The first floor features a spacious living and dining room with magical lighting, alongside 2 large storage rooms. The second floor contains individual bedrooms for each of the elves. Hiraku looks at the finished lodge and feels incredibly proud, hoping it becomes a place where they finally feel safe and at peace. As the days pass, the elves seamlessly integrate into farm life. Hiraku spots them happily snacking on raw green onions and garlic straight from the dirt. Later, he is completely shocked to see them cooking meat over an open fire. He tells Leah that he always assumed elves were vegetarians who lived in perfect harmony with nature and refused to use fire or metal. Leah laughs at his ridiculous stereotype and bluntly tells him that anyone who tries to survive in the wild without fire or meat would die instantly. She asserts that they are hardcore survivalists who do whatever it takes to live. To prove her point, the elves decide to show off their blacksmithing skills as a thank you for letting them stay. Hiraku is surprised again, as he thought only dwarves handled metalwork. Following Leah's instructions, the girls quickly construct an earthen furnace near the river. They gather iron, sand, and charcoal, heat the furnace, and hammer the melted iron on an anvil. In no time, they forge a perfect metal frying pan for the kitchen. Hiraku is thrilled that their civilization is advancing so quickly. Leah proudly states that wandering for 200 years forces a person to learn every survival skill imaginable. The only things they couldn't do were settle down and reproduce, but now they have a home to solve both problems. Later, the elves gather a bunch of medicinal herbs and process them into white balls. Hiraku is impressed by their efficiency. The next day, Leah asks Hiraku if they have any wheat. He explains that they processed all their harvested wheat into flour for storage. Leah excitedly pulls out a ceramic jar containing natural yeast and offers to bake fresh bread. The elves mix the dough, wrap it around wooden skewers, and roast it over a stone fire pit. The result is incredible spiral bread that smells amazing. Hiraku takes a bite and absolutely loves the taste. With the ability to bake bread, Hiraku realizes they need to expand the wheat fields significantly. However, a sudden thought worries him. He asks Lulasi if this forest actually belongs to anyone, fearing that the local authorities might have a problem with him building a massive farm. Lulasi casually mentions that the land is technically under the control of the Demon Lord. Hiraku panics, terrified that a terrifying monster king will come to destroy his home. Lulasi quickly calms him down, explaining that the Demon Lord doesn't actively manage this deep forest. She points out that since Hiraku built the farm entirely on his own without any outside support, the land practically belongs to him. Hiraku accepts this logic and feels relieved. That night, Lulasi, Tia, and the elves sit around the cabin eating fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. They talk about how special Hiraku is, noting that he tamed legendary monsters and grows magical crops in ordinary soil. Tia points out how funny it is that Hiraku possesses such immense power but lacks basic knowledge about the world, like not knowing what elves or angels actually are. Lulasi agrees, laughing at her husband's unique quirks. Meanwhile, Hiraku sits alone by the flickering lamplight, contemplating his next big project. He realizes that expanding the fields will require a lot more water, so he decides to ask Leah and the elves to help him build a massive waterway system tomorrow. To tackle the waterway project, Hiraku starts by digging a massive reservoir near the farm. He plans to draw water directly from the distant river, but he struggles to figure out what material to use for the long aqueduct. He initially considers using wood, but realizes it will leak too much over such a long distance, and finding enough workable stone in the forest is impossible. He eventually comes up with a solution using his almighty farming tool. By transforming the tool into a heavy mallet, he strikes the leftover dirt from the reservoir excavation, magically compacting it into rock-hard, concrete-like blocks. He continuously hammers the dirt, churning out perfectly shaped pieces for the waterway. The High Elves step in to handle the foundation work. They carry the heavy blocks through the forest, carefully aligning and sealing them along a sloped dirt trench. Thanks to the elves' tireless labor, the construction finishes much faster than Hiraku anticipated. The water successfully flows from a gated intake at the river, all the way down into the village's new reservoir, eliminating the need to haul water from the well every day. As the water fills the large basin, several fish get swept through the chute and land on the wooden platform. Hiraku recognizes them as normal fish and is excited to finally add seafood to his diet. Lulasi and Tia warn him that these fish are actually vicious monsters native to the dangerous forest. Unfazed by their fearsome reputation, Hiraku swiftly chops the sharp-toothed fish with his hoe and skewers the fillets to grill over a campfire. He serves the cooked fish to Lulasi and Tia, who are extremely hesitant to eat the monstrous creature. They take a small bite and are instantly shocked by how delicious it is, noting that it tastes exactly like high-quality salmon. The elves also try the fish and fall in love with the flavor. The group spends the next few days catching as many fish as possible, preserving them with salt, and hanging them up to dry for the winter stockpile. With the waterway fully operational, Hiraku decides to experiment with new crops. He uses his hoe to till a small patch of soil while focusing his thoughts on rice plants, and golden stalks instantly sprout from the ground. Realizing that rice can easily grow in this magical soil, he decides to build a proper flooded rice paddy. He swings his hoe with immense force, carving out large rectangular plots and causing the earth to vibrate. The elves watch in pure bewilderment as Hiraku channels water from the new reservoir to flood the dark soil. He then uses his magic watering bucket to instantly sprout vibrant green seedlings. He hands bundles of the fresh seedlings to the elf girls and asks for their help with the planting. The elves are initially squeamish about stepping into the slimy mud, but they quickly get the hang of it and spend the afternoon planting neat rows of rice across the flooded paddies. To protect the new crop from insects, Hiraku assigns Zabuton's spiderlings to patrol the area. The combination of the fresh water and the magical farming tool causes the rice to ripen at an astonishing rate. Soon the fields are completely covered in mature golden stalks. Hiraku and the elves grab sickles and swiftly harvest the entire crop, tying the bundles and hanging them on wooden racks to dry in the sun. Once the rice is fully dried, Hiraku introduces the group to the tedious process of refining it. He builds a wooden threshing machine with sharp metal spikes to strip the grains from the stalk. Next, he shakes the grains through a wooden sieve to remove any leftover leaves and debris. He then uses a heavy stone mortar to remove the tough husks, and finally pounds the grains with a wooden pestle to polish them into pure white rice. The elf girls are completely exhausted by the intense manual labor and openly question if all this effort is really necessary just to eat. Hiraku assures them it will be worth it. To cook the polished rice, Hiraku sets up a traditional stone stove and a heavy metal pot. He asks Lucy to light the fire beneath the pot. Eager to show off her magical prowess, Lucy prepares a massive, highly destructive explosion spell, bragging that she will blast the wood to smithereens. Hiraku quickly yells at her to stop, explaining that cooking rice requires a slow, gentle flame, not a catastrophic explosion. Disappointed, Lucy complies and lights a normal fire. Hiraku carefully monitors the heat, following a specific traditional method, until the rice is perfectly steamed. He takes the fluffy white rice and molds it into large rice balls, stuffing the center with the salted grilled salmon from earlier. He hands the warm onigiri to Lucy, Tia, and the elves. They take a bite and are instantly overwhelmed by the incredible taste. The combination of the salty fish and the soft rice brings them to tears of joy. Seeing their blissful reactions, Hiraku feels a deep sense of satisfaction and considers this his happiest moment since becoming a farmer. After finishing their meal, the group heads back to the muddy fields. The elf girls use a quick burst of cleansing magic to instantly strip the mud and dirt from their bodies and clothes. Hiraku lacks this kind of magic and is forced to wipe himself down manually. He realizes that living without a proper way to wash is incredibly uncomfortable and decides he needs to build a bathhouse. When he mentions the idea, the elves suggest just washing in the nearby river, but Hiraku points out that the water will be freezing cold during the winter months. He draws up a detailed floor plan for a wooden bathhouse, complete with a stone furnace to heat the water, a massive wooden soaking tub, and a separate changing room. The group immediately begins construction, using compacted dirt blocks for the furnace and routing fresh water from the aqueduct. As the building comes together, Hiraku realizes he has a major plumbing issue. He worries about dumping their dirty bathwater and sewage back into the clean river. Lucy suggests using slimes to solve the problem, explaining that the creatures naturally consume dead organic matter and purify waste. Hiraku is terrified of slimes, believing they are highly dangerous monsters that often kill novice adventurers, but Tia assures him they are completely harmless. She flies off into the forest and quickly returns with a handful of blue slimes. Hiraku creates a dedicated purification pool in the wastewater trench and drops the slimes inside. He even places a few slimes directly inside the outhouse toilets to automatically clean up the waste, completely solving their sanitation problem. With the bathhouse finally complete, Hiraku gathers some firewood to heat the tub and stumbles upon a patch of wild mushrooms. He harvests a variety of them to make a hot pot for dinner. Once the bath is hot and ready, he gathers Lucy, Tia, and the elves to explain the bathing process. He instructs them to undress in the changing room, thoroughly scrub themselves in the washing area, and then soak in the hot tub. The girls are slightly confused by the steps and ask Hiraku to demonstrate. Hiraku agrees, stripping down and getting into the steaming wooden tub alone. He closes his eyes and enjoys the intense relaxation, reminiscing about his past life in a hospital where he was never allowed to take a proper bath. Suddenly, his peaceful moment is interrupted when Lucy, Tia, and the elves excitedly strip off their clothes and jump into the water with him. The girls argue that bathing together is much more efficient and saves them from having to heat the water twice. Hiraku feels incredibly embarrassed and overwhelmed by sharing a bath with so many women at once. Unable to relax under their gaze, he makes a quick excuse and climbs out of the tub early, deeply regretting his decision not to build separate facilities for men and women. The next day, Kuro and his pack of wolves escort a new group of high elves into the village clearing. The 5 new arrivals introduce themselves as Lafa, Lhasa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. They explain that they are cousins of Leia's group and have also spent the last 200 years wandering through the dangerous wilderness looking for a safe haven. Hiraku feels sympathetic to their struggles and immediately invites them to live on the farm permanently. The new elves are overjoyed by his hospitality. They thank him profusely and excitedly declare that they will help construct more houses, and immediately start making children to ensure the survival of their race. Hiraku is slightly bewildered by their aggressive enthusiasm for reproduction, but is happy to have a larger workforce to help manage the growing farm. As the village population continues to expand, Kuro observes the bustling farm and reflects on his own journey. Long before meeting Hiraku, Kuro lived his entire life as a lone wolf in the darkest depths of the forest. He never lost a single fight and survived by hunting whatever he pleased. His solitary existence ended when he encountered a powerful female wolf who completely overpowered him in combat. Accepting his defeat, they became mates and traveled together. Soon after, his mate became pregnant, and Kuro looked forward to raising a pack of his own. However, their peaceful life was shattered when they crossed paths with the grappler bear, the undisputed king of the forest. The massive beast severely injured both wolves. Weakened and unable to hunt, they were driven away by their former prey and forced to retreat to the very center of the forest, an area so dangerous that even the grappler bear avoided it. Expecting to die from their wounds, the two wolves stumbled upon Hiraku. Kuro was initially baffled that such a fragile-looking human could survive in the deadliest part of the woods, but he quickly sensed the limitless, terrifying power radiating from Hiraku's farming tool. Instead of finishing them off, Hiraku healed their wounds and fed them the meat of a legendary great boar. Recognizing Hiraku's overwhelming strength and unexpected kindness, Kuro and his mate abandoned their pride and swore eternal loyalty to him. Over the months, their pups grew into strong adults, and the pack flourished alongside Hiraku's expanding family of wives and villagers. Kuro watches Hiraku interact with the cheerful elves and angels, noting that his master has become the leader of a massive, powerful pack. Yet, Kuro finds it highly amusing that despite possessing such godly power, Hiraku remains completely oblivious to the truth about his beloved dogs. Hiraku still believes they are just ordinary pets, completely unaware that Kuro and his family are actually terrifying, legendary monsters known throughout the world as Inferno Wolves. A few days later, the massive two-story log mansion is finally complete. Hiraku stands outside with Leia, Leaf, and Lakat, admiring the impressive structure they all helped design. They are thrilled with how it turned out and head inside for a full tour of the interior. The first floor features a spacious main hall designed for everyone to gather and hang out. Across from the hall is Hiraku's personal bedroom. His room connects to a large dining room and an indoor kitchen. They also check out the cellar, which is perfect for storing food and firewood for the coming cold months. Moving to the second floor, the elf girls are ecstatic to find their own private bedroom. This gives them much-needed space away from the growing crowd. While exploring the hallways, they stumble upon a room with a heavy bolt lock on the door. Hiraku decides it is best to just ignore it and pretend they never saw it. They also check out the bathroom. It features a massive wooden bathtub that easily accommodates several people. Hiraku feels a deep sense of security looking out the window at the giant tree. He feels as though it is watching over their new home. To finish decorating the exterior, he uses his farming tool to carve large stone statues of his horned wolves. He places them outside the front double doors alongside his god statue. With the house finished, Hiraku realizes he is starving from all the hard work. He decides to cook a completely new dish for the group called curry. He heads out to his crop field. He notes that his almighty farming tool allows him to grow plants that normally could never survive in this climate. Lou and Tia are busy researching magical talismans to avoid chores. Leah steps up to help him with the cooking instead. Hiraku starts by harvesting the essential spices. He picks cumin for its distinct aroma and turmeric roots to give the curry its rich yellow color. He asks Leah to use her magic to quickly dry the turmeric roots so they can be ground into powder. Next, he harvests coriander. He explains that they will grind the dried seeds and use the fresh green leaves as cilantro. To test the cilantro's strong scent, he offers a fresh sprig to Kuro and the other wolves. The moment the wolves take a sniff, They are completely repulsed by the smell. They roll around on the ground to get the scent off them. Hiraku is amazed to discover a simple herb capable of driving off powerful inferno wolves. He figures it might be useful for village defense later. After gathering black pepper and cayenne peppers, he brings all the ingredients back to the outdoor kitchen. Hiraku worries that the girls might find a guy who makes his own curry from scratch annoying. He pushes the thought aside and gets to work anyway. He heats up rapeseed oil in a large metal pan and sautés chunks of rabbit meat until they are perfectly browned. He then removes the meat and tosses the cumin seeds into the leftover juices. He carefully cooks them to release their rich aroma without burning them. While the oil infuses, Leah grinds the rest of the spices into a fine powder using a stone mortar and pestle. Hiraku then adds finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic to the pan. He sautés the mixture until it forms a thick paste. He throws in diced tomatoes, the freshly ground spice powder, and a pinch of salt. Finally, he adds the cooked rabbit meat, boiled soybeans, and plenty of water. He covers the pot to let the stew simmer. As the delicious smell fills the air, Hiraku suddenly realizes he completely forgot to make a side dish for the meal. He knows the curry needs naan bread. With Lu, Tia, and all the elves to feed, he has to make a massive batch very quickly. He rapidly kneads the white dough, and Leah helps him roll it out flat with a wooden pin. To bake the bread in a hurry, Hiraku slaps the flattened dough pieces directly onto the searing hot exterior of a metal pot over the fire. The incredible aroma of the bubbling curry and freshly baked bread quickly draws Lu, Tia, and the rest of the elves out of the forest. They line up eagerly. They are slightly hesitant when they see the strange brown color of the stew. Hiraku hands out the bowls and explains that they need to use the flatbread to scoop up the meat and sauce. The girls take their first bite and are instantly blown away by the tingling, spicy flavor. They find the heat completely addicting and quickly devour their portions. They even beg for seconds. Hiraku is thrilled that his recipe is a massive success. The girls eat with such ferocity that they drain the entire pot. They leave absolutely nothing for him to eat. He even serves a bowl to the wolves. The beasts devour the spicy meal and kick up a cloud of dust in excitement. As the weather grows colder, Hiraku shifts his focus to preparing the village for the harsh winter. Knowing they will be stuck indoors once the snow piles up, he chops a massive mountain of firewood and stacks it neatly in the storage shed. He then visits Zabuton. She is preparing to hibernate in the canopy of the giant tree. He gives her a large basket of potatoes and plenty of extra blankets to keep her warm. Leah and the other elves plan to spend the winter indoors. They want to continue their work on a new forge and various crafting projects. Since Kuro and the wolf pack will struggle to hunt in the deep snow, Hiraku asks Lu and Tia for help. They use their magic to smoke and dry large racks of rabbit meat to ensure everyone has enough protein. He also builds a specialized snow storage unit for their harvested vegetables. He explains that by leaving the bottom boxes empty to catch the melting ice, the vegetables in the top compartments will stay dry and perfectly preserved all winter. Watching Lu effortlessly cast fire magic and Tia summon massive stone golems makes Hiraku curious about his own magical potential. He attempts to cast a simple wind spell at his storage boxes, but nothing happens. He feels slightly discouraged. He notes that his only real skills are farming and cooking. Lu notices his disappointment and quickly reassures him. She tells him that surviving alone in this deadly forest and building their entire settlement from nothing makes him the most amazing person she has ever met. The winter snow finally arrives. It buries the village and forces everyone inside the log cabin. To keep the group entertained, Hiraku carves several tabletop games out of wood. He makes sets for reversi, chess, and mahjong. He introduces reversi first. He explains the simple rules of trapping the opponent's pieces to flip their colors. Lu eagerly challenges Tia to a match to settle their ongoing rivalry. However, Tia easily outsmarts her and dominates the board. Unable to handle the crushing defeat, Lu attempts to flip the wooden board and scatter the pieces to force a restart. Anticipating this, Tia immediately casts a levitation spell. She freezes all the pieces perfectly in midair and completely denies Lu her escape. While the girls argue, Kuro and another wolf decide to try their paws at chess. Hiraku watches the two massive beasts in absolute terror. They demonstrate a perfect understanding of the complex rules and play a highly strategic match against each other. Refusing to let the wolves dominate all the games, Hiraku challenges the group to a round of mahjong. He specifically targets the wolves to avenge Lu's earlier defeat. He assumes the intricate tile game will be too complicated for the animals to grasp. However, Kuro instantly calls a winning hand. Hiraku checks the tiles and is horrified to discover that Kuro managed to pull off a Yakuman. This incredibly rare 13 orphans hand completely bankrupts Hiraku's points. This makes Kuro the undisputed champion of the cabin. Realizing that sitting around playing board games all day is making everyone stir crazy, Hiraku decides to build a mini bowling alley down the main hallway. To make the game more engaging for the girls, he paints comical faces on the wooden pins. He labels them as dangerous criminals like arsonists, pirates, and scam artists. He tells the girls that the goal is to take out the bad guys. The group loves the concept and gathers around to watch Hiraku demonstrate. He strikes a dramatic pose and rolls a wooden ball down the red carpet. He completely smashes the villainous pin. The girls erupt into cheers and high fives. They are thrilled by the simple but satisfying game. The group spends the rest of the winter happily bowling, playing games, and eating large pots of hot stew together. The days pass much faster than Hiraku anticipated. Soon the snow melts, giving way to a warm and sunny spring. Hiraku steps outside into the dirt courtyard. He enjoys the fresh morning air and discusses his plans to start planting new crops with Lu and Tia. Suddenly, they hear a loud tapping sound coming from the canopy of the giant tree. Hiraku realizes that Zabuton has finally woken up from her long hibernation. As they look up to greet the spider, a massive shadow passes over them. A terrifying red wyvern with glowing eyes suddenly swoops down from the clear blue sky. It heads straight for the village. Hiraku panics, initially mistaking the beast for a dragon. Tia quickly corrects him. Before anyone can draw a weapon or prepare a defense, a colossal cyan magic beam shoots up from the ground. It strikes the wyvern head-on. The overwhelming magical blast instantly vaporizes the massive monster. It completely disintegrates the beast into a blinding flash of light. Hiraku, Lu, and Tia stand frozen in the courtyard. They stare up at the empty sky in utter shock at the sudden and destructive display of power. The group looks up and spots a massive red wyvern descending from the sky. They realize something that dangerous could destroy their entire settlement. The beast immediately unleashes a colossal fireball directly at them. Lu acts quickly and throws up a multi-layered magical barrier to protect the massive tree and the surrounding crop field. The intense flames slam into the shield. The barrier shatters under the overwhelming pressure, but it manages to absorb the brunt of the magical explosion. Glowing embers scatter across the area and start small fires. The elf girls frantically run around the clearing and use cloths to extinguish the flames before they can spread to the building. Hiraku watches the chaos and realizes they are sitting ducks. He knows the wyvern can just continue attacking them from the safety of the sky. He decides he has to take it down immediately to protect everyone. He summons his magical farming tool and transforms it into a golden spear. He channels his energy into the weapon. He hurls the spear straight at the flying beast. The weapon emits a colossal beam of magical energy. The beam easily pierces the wyvern's magical defenses and blows a massive hole right through its chest. The beast dies instantly and crashes into the dense forest below. After the dust settles, Hiraku and the girls check the village. They confirm all the buildings are safe and the fires are completely out. They walk over to inspect the massive wyvern carcass. The girls explain that running into a wyvern this large is an incredibly rare event. They note that wyverns usually require an entire army to defeat. Hiraku ignores the danger and simply asks if the monster is edible. That evening, Hiraku prepares a massive feast using the wyvern meat. He grills thick round steaks with spices. He wraps the breast meat in large leaves and steams it. He takes the tail meat and simmers it into a hearty vegetable stew. He serves the dishes to the group. Lu and the elf girls take their first bites and are completely blown away by the flavor. They expected the meat to be tough since normal weapons cannot even pierce a wyvern's skin, but it turns out to be incredibly tender and juicy. They happily devour the meal. They realize how incredibly lucky they are to have Hiraku around to protect them. Meanwhile, news of the wyvern's effortless defeat quickly reaches the demonic kingdom of Galgardo. Inside the Demon Lord's castle, Generals Beazle, Randon, and Gratz hold an emergency meeting. They receive a report that a massive wyvern was killed in just 2 hits by a ground attack. The generals completely panic. They know a single wyvern requires their entire military force to handle. The idea that someone nearby possesses the power to obliterate one instantly terrifies them. Randon stresses out over the potential threat and the fact that they just finalized the annual military budget. He throws a fit and jokingly demands to resign from his position, but Beazle begs him to stay and figure out a plan. At the exact same time, the gatekeeper Dragon Drime and his assistant Gucci stand on their castle balcony. They witness the massive magical beam from afar. Gucci points out the sheer destructive power of the attack. Drime admits that if he had been hit by that beam, it would have pierced straight through him as well. They wisely decide to leave the mysterious attacker completely alone. Back at the village the next morning, Hiraku decides it is finally time to start making alcohol. He gathers the elves and explains his plan to make wine. They head out to the vineyard and spend the day harvesting all the ripe dark grapes. They fill multiple wooden baskets with the fruit. Hiraku asks Lalasha to build several watertight wooden barrels to store the juice. He then constructs a massive wooden vat and pours all the grapes inside. He places a large wooden pole in the center for support. He instructs the girls to wash their feet and step into the vat to crush the grapes. Lou and the elf girls hesitate at first. They feel weird about stomping on something they plan to drink later, but Hiraku assures them it is the traditional method. They step inside and their feet sink deep into the soft fruit. Purple juice splashes against their legs. Hiraku tells them to walk in a continuous circle around the pole. They start moving, but one of the blonde elves loses her footing. She bumps into her purple-haired friend. They quickly realize they need a way to keep their movements synchronized. They decide to sing an old working song from their former village to maintain a steady rhythm. The song works perfectly, and they begin stomping the grapes in unison. Suddenly, a pink magical slime emerges from the crushed grapes and wraps around the girl's legs. Hiraku quickly grabs the slime and tosses it out of the vat into a barrel. The girls continue their work and have a great time. Kazuna, Sylvia, Himakawa, and Eurytia also join in the stomping. By the end of the day, they manage to fill 16 large wooden barrels with grape mash. Hiraku explains that the natural yeast on the grape skins will ferment the juice into wine over time. Sylvia looks at the barrels and happily predicts they will probably drink it all immediately once it is ready. Far away in the divine realm, the god who reincarnated Hiraku faces serious trouble. The goddess of agriculture confronts him in the cosmic void. She yells at him for his extreme carelessness. She is furious that he mistakenly punished Hiraku's soul, dropped him into the deadly forest of death, and gave him the holy lance scream. God tries to defend himself by pointing out that Hiraku is perfectly fine and is just using the ultimate holy weapon as a simple farming tool. The goddess refuses to listen to his excuses. She points out that the divine statue's humans pray to now look like a creepy old man mask because of his action. As punishment for his incompetence, she sentences him to sit frozen in timeout for 300 years. Back at the village, Zabuton catches an intruder in her sticky webs. Hiraku discovers a white-haired vampire girl named Flora tangled in the threads. She explains that she is Lou's cousin. She heard Lou was being chased by a dangerous angel and traveled all the way to the deadly forest to rescue her. Flora is completely stunned when she finds Lou happily living alongside the angel Tia and a pack of terrifying inferno wolves. Hiraku welcomes her and invites her to stay for dinner. He serves her a meal featuring white tofu cubes, miso soup, and soy sauce. Flora tastes the strange food and asks what the soft white cubes are. Hiraku explains that tofu and soy sauce are all made from soybeans. He notes that the miso and soy sauce get their distinct flavors through fermentation. Flora is a dedicated researcher and becomes incredibly curious about the process. Hiraku explains that microscopic organisms cause the ingredients to transform. This completely blows Flora's mind. She becomes instantly obsessed with the concept of microorganisms and the potential of fermented foods. She vows to bring miso and soy sauce to the rest of the world. She immediately leaves the village to gather her things and make preparations to move in permanently. 1 month later, Flora returns to the settlement. She brings a large group of Oni maids dressed in black and white uniform. The lead maid, Anne, introduces herself and offers their services to Hiraku. Flora also brings several cows so the village can have a steady supply of milk, butter, and cheese. Shortly after, Tia announces that she has also brought her own subordinates to help the village. She introduces 3 heavily armed angel guards named Granmaria, Kudel, and Corone. Tia assigns them to constantly patrol the skies above the forest to ensure no more wyverns or monsters surprise them. Tia also brings a group of muscular green lizardmen led by a warrior named Daga. The lizardmen offer to handle all the heavy lifting and outdoor construction work. They even bring a cage full of live chickens to provide the village with fresh eggs. Hiraku is thrilled with all the new additions. The Oni maids quickly take over the cleaning and cooking duties. They sweep the massive log mansion and keep everything spotless. Hiraku decides to teach them advanced cooking techniques like frying, braising, and steaming. The maids learn quickly and prepare a massive feast of killer rabbit steaks and fresh vegetable. Hiraku notes that despite their polite manners, the Oni maids are incredibly strong. He also gives Daga a red scarf to tie around his arm so he can easily tell him apart from the other lizardmen. The village continues to run smoothly until Leah suddenly arrives with a massive crowd of female elves. Hiraku is shocked by the sudden influx of people. Leah explains that she scoured the forest and brought back every single wandering elf she could find. Hiraku looks at the massive crowd and asks where all the men are. Leah casually replies that no male elves survived the forest. She cheerfully states that they fully intend to use Hiraku to repopulate their entire race. Hiraku feels completely overwhelmed by the terrifying implication and decides to just ignore her comment for his own sanity. A few days later, Hiraku realizes their small camp has grown into a bustling town. He calls a meeting in the main hall with all the representatives. He gathers the elves, the maids, the angels, Daga, Lu, Tia, and the wolves. He explains that they need to give their settlement an official name. The girls excitedly suggest naming it after him, offering ideas like Machio Town or Hiraku Village. Hiraku immediately shoots the idea down because he finds it way too embarrassing. He suggests naming the town after the surrounding forest instead. The girls fall silent and inform him that the area is globally known as the Forest of Death. Hiraku pictures a cursed ghost town filled with poison swamps and quickly changes his mind. After some brainstorming, they decide to name the settlement Great Tree Village in honor of the massive ancient tree standing at the center of their home. To celebrate the official naming of the village, Hiraku organizes a massive nighttime festival. They build a giant bonfire near the great tree. Hiraku brings out the very first batch of wine they produced from the stomped grapes. He opens the barrels and pours the red wine into wooden mugs for everyone. The villagers cheer and begin the feast. The elves, maids, and lizardmen dance around the fire and eat the delicious food. The wine is a massive hit, and everyone drinks heavily. Even the wolves lap up the alcohol and end up completely wasted, passing out upside down in the dirt. Flora drinks way too much and passes out face first on a picnic table. Lu gets completely drunk but stubbornly slams her mug on the table and demands more wine. Hiraku sits back and watches his friends laugh and celebrate. He feels incredibly grateful for his new life and the community they built together. Lu points out that everyone in the crowd has already started calling him the mayor. Hiraku watches the joyful faces illuminated by the campfire. He smiles and officially accepts his new role as the mayor of Great Tree Village. He raises his wooden mug and toasts to their future. Time passes from winter to summer. The population of the settlement continues to increase steadily. Hiraku officially serves as the mayor of the newly named Great Tree Village, but his day-to-day life remains largely unaffected. He continues his routine of tending to the fields and harvesting fresh vegetables like cabbages, eggplants, and tomatoes. One day, while he is working in the garden, Tia flies down from the sky and lands near him. She urgently informs Hiraku that a formal messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived at their borders. Hiraku is completely surprised by this sudden visit. He steps up to fulfill his mayoral duties and meets with the messenger, a mustached man dressed in a red suit who introduces himself as Beezle. Beezle states that he is one of the Demon Lord's 4 great generals. He presents Hiraku with a gift to commemorate their meeting and explains that the Demon Lord wants to formally discuss the status of the village's settlement on his land. Lu quietly informs Hiraku that while no one technically owns the specific plot of land they are on, the entire region falls under the broad jurisdiction of the Demon Lord. Hiraku immediately worries that the Demon Lord will demand exorbitant taxes or force them off the property entirely. He decides he needs to handle the situation carefully and negotiates directly with Beezle. Hiraku offers to pay 10% of their total agricultural harvest as an annual tax to clearly demonstrate that the village has absolutely no intention of rebelling against the demonic kingdom. He specifies that this tax will only apply to their crops and will strictly exclude other products like milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol. He adds that if the Demon Lord wants any of those specific items, they will have to conduct separate trade negotiation. Beezle listens to the terms and immediately accepts the arrangement without any argument. He looks incredibly stressed out during the entire exchange. They quickly sign a formal contract solidifying the deal. Hiraku worries that he might have been far too aggressive during the negotiations, so he decides to send Beezle home with a large present of fresh crops to smooth things over. After Beezle leaves, Hiraku consults with Lu and Tia, asking if he made a mistake or offended the general. Lu reassures him and praises his handling of the situation. She explains that the standard tax rate under the Demon Lord is usually around 50 or 60%. By securing a 10% rate and arranging for the demons to collect the goods only once a year, Hiraku effectively bought the kingdom's official protection for a massive discount. She notes that infrequent visits will also prevent the demons from ever accurately measuring the village's true production output. They then inspect the gift Beezle left behind and discover it is a highly valuable almighty medicine capable of curing any injury instantly. Meanwhile, deep inside the demonic kingdom, Beezle returns to the Dark Castle and holds an emergency meeting with his fellow generals, Gratz and Randon. Gratz and Randon demand to know why Beezle accepted such a ridiculously low tax rate and allowed the village to operate so independently. Beezle clutches his head in absolute distress and explains that he had no other choice. He reveals the terrifying truth about Great Tree Village. He tells them that the village possesses a military force capable of effortlessly slaughtering a wyvern. Furthermore, the village is home to Lu, the legendary vampire princess, and Tia, the strongest angel of annihilation. Beezle adds that he also saw an entire army of high elves, a massive pack of deadly inferno wolves, and the notorious killer angels acting as the welcoming committee. Beezle confesses that he truly thought his life was over the moment he stepped foot in the village. He explains that if he had rejected their 10% offer, the village would have instantly become an enemy force, which would spell doom for their entire kingdom. Gratz and Randon listen in horror and finally understand why Beezle capitulated so quickly. Beezle then tries to lighten the mood by presenting the gift of apples Hiraku gave him. The demon lord himself steps in, takes a bite of the fruit, and is absolutely amazed by the incredible flavor. However, Beezle closely examines the cloth that the apples were wrapped in. He realizes with pure terror that the silk comes from a great demon spider, a legendary monster that once fought a previous demon lord to a complete standstill. Randon absolutely loses his mind upon hearing that the village also harbors a great demon spider. He completely panics, shouts that their kingdom is doomed, and immediately tries to resign from his position as a general. Several days later, the village receives another unexpected visitor. A colossal blue dragon descends from the sky and lands near the settlement. The beast introduces himself as Drime, the one true ruler of the dragon. He is accompanied by his human assistant, Gucci. Drime and Gucci present Hiraku with a very expensive, ornate magical sword as a greeting gift. Gucci explains that Drime's lair is located in the mountains to the south, and even though there is quite a distance between them, Drime considers the village to be his neighbors and simply wants to formally introduce himself. Hiraku appreciates the polite gesture and wants to invite the dragon inside for a meal, but he points out that Drime is far too massive to fit into any of their wooden buildings. Gucci completely agrees and instructs his master to take on a smaller form. Drime gets enveloped in a bright light and shrinks down into a middle-aged human man with a dark mustache. They all head inside, and Hiraku treats them to a massive feast. Drime absolutely falls in love with the village's food and heavily indulges in their homemade red wine. He gets completely drunk, laughs boisterously, and drunkenly declares that he refuses to go home because he wants to live in the village forever. Gucci realizes his master is causing a scene and forces Drime to leave before they overstay their welcome and anger the powerful residents. Gucci politely excuses them, and Drime transforms back into his massive dragon form before flying away into the night sky, taking a large batch of fresh apples with them as a parting gift. Following these back-to-back visits, Hiraku realizes that handling diplomatic relations is becoming incredibly complicated. He decides they need a better system for managing guests. He meets with Leah and the other elves to discuss constructing a dedicated guest house. He explains that he is not comfortable inviting strangers directly into their personal homes, but making them wait outside by the gate is also completely unacceptable. Hiraku initially suggests building a small house meant to hold about 4 people. The elves immediately reject the idea, pointing out that anyone traveling through the dangerous forest will naturally travel in large, heavily armed groups. They decide to build a massive 2-story facility capable of comfortably fitting at least 30 people. They plan to use the entire first floor as an open space for hosting large feasts and dedicate the second floor entirely to bedrooms for overnight stays. Once the guest house is built, Hiraku turns his attention to how they physically greet their visitors. Under the old system, the angels would violently capture anyone approaching the village, or the giant spider Zabaton would sound a massive alarm that caused every villager to grab their weapons and prepare for a bloody battle. Hiraku feels this approach is way too hostile for a village trying to establish peaceful trade. To fix this, Leah crafts a silver bell and hangs it near the entrance for visitors to ring. Hiraku then suggests forming a small, non-threatening welcoming committee consisting only of himself, Lu, and Tia. The girls immediately shoot down this idea as well, arguing that enemies might easily disguise themselves as friendly visitors to launch a surprise attack. They compromise by adding several high elves, ogre maids, and heavily armed lizardmen to the welcoming party for extra security. Flora also volunteers to help by offering to stay awake and keep watch over any guests who spend the night, utilizing her vampire ability to go days without sleep. The new hospitality system is put to the test much sooner than expected. A small group of beastmen wearing travel gear and carrying large backpacks arrives at the edge of the forest. The leader, a purple-haired man named Garf, introduces himself and explains that they hail from a place called Howling Village. He states that they navigated the dangerous mountains and forests specifically to establish friendly relations with Great Tree Village. Lu steps forward to handle the initial greeting. She politely welcomes them but then sharply asks Garf if the 4 men standing before her represent their entire group. Garf nervously confirms that they are the only ones present. Lu immediately glares at him and declares that she will treat the rest of their hidden companions as hostile enemies. Garf begins sweating profusely and admits that they left a few stragglers hiding in the woods as a strategic precaution. Lu warns him that such tactics are incredibly dangerous because the village's inferno wolves have already tracked down and surrounded the hidden troops. Garf quickly apologizes for the deception. Lu advises him to behave while inside the village borders and escorts the reunited group to the newly constructed guest house. The beastmen are completely blown away by the size of the building and the presence of the beautiful maids. However, Hiraku soon notices that the maids are treating the guests very coldly. Instead of the usual grand feast, the maids serve the beastmen a meager meal consisting only of basic bread, raw vegetables, and water. Hiraku takes Tia aside and asks why they are acting like they are trapping enemies rather than welcoming guests. Tia explains that it is standard protocol for visitors to bring an offering when establishing relations, citing Bezel and Drime as prime examples. Since the beastmen brought absolutely nothing and actively tried to hide troops in the surrounding woods, they earned a significantly downgraded level of hospitality. Hiraku understands the logic but still feels terrible watching them eat such a sad meal. He steps in and forces the maids to serve the beastmen a small ration of wine, limiting it to 2 cups per person. The beastmen drink the wine and absolutely love the flavor, completely cheering up. Hiraku decides to sit down with Garf to learn more about their background before judging them too harshly. Garf explains that Howling Village is a 500-year-old settlement populated primarily by beastmen who make their living through hunting and mining. For generations, they survived by trading their mined goods with a human settlement across the mountain. However, recent troubles in the human village made their trade route incredibly unstable. Desperate for a new trading partner, they learned about Great Tree Village from a subordinate of the Demon Lord and decided to make the trek. Garf admits that they kept troops hidden outside because they needed a failsafe to report back to their village in case Great Tree Village turned out to be a hostile trap. Hiraku is actually very impressed by their tactical caution and respects their dedication to their people. They quickly move on to discussing a formal trade agreement. Garf notes that Howling Village does not use currency, and Hiraku admits his village also operates without money. Garf proposes an open market exchange of physical goods. He offers to supply items crafted from their mined ore such as paints, silverware, glassworks, and metal tools. Hiraku gets incredibly excited at the prospect of finally acquiring paints and glass. In exchange, Garf asks for regular shipments of food and crops. Garf also requests that Hiraku's people travel to Howling Village to conduct the trades, explaining that carrying heavy goods through the monster-infested forest is far too difficult for his people. Hiraku realizes that Kuro and the rest of the Inferno Wolves can easily carry massive loads on their backs, so he happily agrees to make the deliveries. Before the beastmen pack up to leave, Hiraku pulls Garf aside and confesses that he actually had no idea that visitors were expected to bring gifts. He tells Garf to completely forget about the offering rule and not to worry about it. Garf is visibly relieved by Hiraku's kindness and promises to bring something special for them next time anyway. When the time comes to execute the very first trade run, Hiraku eagerly prepares to go. However, the girls absolutely refuse to let him leave. They argue that it looks terribly weak for the top leader of a settlement to personally handle delivery runs right away. They decide to draw lots to see who will act as the official representative, and Tia wins the spot. Fortunately, the transportation issue is easily solved. Drime, who has made a habit of visiting the village regularly to drink wine and drop off random treasures, offers to help. Drime agrees to let the trading party load all their heavy sacks of crops onto his back and flies them directly to Howling Village in exchange for a single barrel of wine. Tia, Daga, and a few lizardmen climb onto the dragon and take off. When they arrive at Howling Village, the local beastmen are absolutely terrified to see a massive dragon landing in their territory. Several days pass before Tia and her team finally return to Great Tree Village. Hiraku greets them and asks how the expedition went. Tia happily reports that the trade was a massive success. She explains that the beastmen were initially hesitant to approach their goods, but once she handed out free samples of fresh apples, a massive crowd gathered instantly. They traded away every single item they brought, including the barrel of wine that was originally meant for Daga's personal consumption. Tia then shifts to more serious news. She informs Hiraku that the mayor of Howling Village formally requested that a portion of their population be allowed to permanently migrate to Great Tree Village. Tia reveals that there are 20 people looking to move, and all of them are young women. Hiraku knows that their village currently has a massive gender imbalance and desperately needs more men to ensure its long-term future. He agrees to accept all 20 women, but he sets a strict condition that Howling Village must also send at least 2 young men along with them. Tia agrees and relays the message. Sometime later, the new group of migrants finally arrives at the edge of the forest. A beastkin girl with a fluffy tail named Sina steps forward to introduce herself. She is incredibly nervous and practically begs Hiraku to let them stay. She tells him that they are mentally prepared to be used however he sees fit, as long as he does not abandon them to the deadly forest. Hiraku feels bad for her and quickly reassures her that they have beds ready. He tells the group to just relax, take their time getting acclimated to their new lives, and not worry about being kicked out. Senna is completely overjoyed by his kindness and thanks him profusely. Hiraku then asks if they managed to bring the young men he specifically requested. Senna proudly confirms that they brought 3 males with them. Hiraku is absolutely thrilled until the crowd parts and he looks down. He realizes the 3 young men are actually literal toddlers who barely reach his knees. The elf women immediately begin doing math in their heads, calculating that they will have to wait at least 5 or 10 entire years before the boys are old enough to be of any use. Hiraku stares at the children and realizes he is still the only capable adult male in the entire settlement. Despite the massive misunderstanding, he accepts the heavy burden and welcomes the children, knowing he must continue working hard to secure the future of the village. After the beastmen from Howling Village officially settle into their new homes, the young girls from the group feel incredibly nervous about their new environment. Lemulius takes charge as the housing manager, but the beastmen girls continue to expect terrible treatment from the village resident. Hiraku sends the maids to reassure the new arrivals that no one has any intention of mistreating them. Despite these assurances, the beastmen girls constantly faint from pure shock because they are completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of powerful monsters living in the settlement. Hiraku decides they will simply have to get used to their new surroundings over time. Later, while Hiraku watches the beastmen children play in the dirt, Sena rushes over and uses healing magic on one of the girls. Hiraku is completely surprised to learn that Sena can use magic. He quickly realizes that he might be the only person in the entire village without magical abilities. He checks with the others and discovers that Tia and all the angels can easily cast spells. Leah and the High Elves demonstrate their ability to levitate heavy baskets with magic. Anne and the lizardmen show off their proficiency with water magic while tending to the radishes. Even the giant spiders, the inferno wolves, and the bees are capable of using elemental magic to extinguish fires or create lights. Hiraku watches a small blue slime duplicate itself with magical energy and finally accepts his lack of magical talent. Sena tries to comfort him, but Hiraku decides there is no point in wishing for the impossible and chooses to just focus on his agricultural duties. His peaceful farming is suddenly interrupted by a massive earthquake that shakes the entire forest. Tia quickly flies down and reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting each other in the northern woods. She warns Hiraku that the intense battle might eventually cause collateral damage to the village. Hiraku considers the threat and simply wonders if the two giant monsters taste good. Tia takes Hiraku into the sky so they can get a better view of the situation. They spot the massive bear and the giant horned serpent locked in a brutal standoff. Hiraku drops down from the sky and effortlessly kills both of the massive beasts in a single strike. The lizardmen use a wooden sled to drag the massive carcasses back to the settlement. The angels watch Hiraku and openly admit that none of them could take down such powerful monsters with a single attack. Once the carcasses are brought to the cabin, Hiraku immediately starts preparing a feast. He cooks the grappler bear meat in a large pot and adds a massive amount of the village's precious red wine to create a stew. The maids freak out over the wasted alcohol, but Hiraku insists that wine braising is a completely normal cooking technique. He tastes the stew and finds the bear meat to be incredibly gamey. For his second dish, he takes the bloody viper meat and deep fries it until it is golden brown. The angels try the fried snake and absolutely love it. Hiraku notes that the viper tastes exactly like fried chicken breast. He feels the meal is missing a specific condiment, so he decides to make mayonnaise from scratch. He heads over to Flora's laboratory to ask for an antibacterial agent to kill any harmful microorganisms in the raw eggs. Flora excitedly offers him a vibrant pink potion, but she warns him that a single drop will blast anything over the mountain. Hiraku rejects the explosive and asks for something safer. Flora then provides a clear blue medicine that is perfectly safe for food consumption. Hiraku thanks her and asks about the progress of her miso fermentation project. Flora admits her attempts have been a complete disaster. She explains that she followed all of his instructions, but the mixture never fermented properly and instead caused massive magical explosions that destroyed her hut 3 times. Hiraku agrees to help her try again without using any explosive materials. He goes to the chicken coop and gathers fresh brown eggs from the terrified birds. He cracks the eggs, separates the yolks into a wooden bowl, and adds salt. He then mixes in apple vinegar and slowly stirs in the oil until the mixture thickens into creamy mayonnaise. Flora tries the mayonnaise with the fried viper and is completely amazed by the flavor. She starts eating the mayonnaise straight out of the bowl, but Hiraku stops her and warns her that eating it plain is terrible for her health. With the mayonnaise finished, Hiraku and Flora move on to making the miso. They soak soybeans in water and boil them in a large metal pot. They transfer the boiled soybeans to large ceramic mortars and crush them with heavy wooden pestles. Hiraku then uses his almighty farming tool to generate the necessary koi mold, chanting aloud during the process. Flora realizes her previous attempts failed because she did not chant the specific words to activate the mold. They mix the koi mold with salt, form the dough into balls, and pack everything tightly into wooden barrels. They place heavy stones on top of the barrels and move them into the dark cellar. Hiraku explains that the miso will need several months to age and develop its intense flavors. While they wait for the fermentation process, a group of elder dwarves led by a man named Donovan arrives at the village. Donovan explains that his group traveled a very long way after hearing rumors about the village's high-quality alcohol. The dwarves have absolutely no money to pay for the drinks, but they offer to share their advanced brewing technology in exchange for access to the crops. Hiraku happily agrees to the trade and provides them with a massive supply of corn. Donovan and his men immediately get to work mashing the corn in large metal pots. They set up a copper distillation apparatus and process the liquid into a crystal-clear corn whiskey. Hiraku tastes the new whiskey and instantly blushes from its overwhelming strength. Donovan laughs at Hiraku for being a lightweight. The dwarves decide to stay in the village permanently to work as the official brewers. Hiraku throws a massive welcome banquet to celebrate the official arrival of both the beastmen and the dwarves. Everyone drinks heavily and enjoys the fresh food covered in mayonnaise. During the party, Hiraku sits down with Donovan and asks if any of the single women in the village catch his eye. Hiraku hopes the dwarves will marry some of the girls and help fix the gender imbalance. Donovan completely rejects the idea, stating that all the elves and beastmen are far too young for him. He adds that he is only attracted to women who can grow thick beards. Several days later, Hiraku is working in the forest when he spots a massive black dragon flying straight toward the village. He assumes the dragon is hostile and prepares to kill it before it can cause any damage. He swings his glowing staff and fires a massive beam of golden magic into the sky. Suddenly, Drime appears in his blue dragon form, accompanied by a white dragon named Grafaloon. Hiraku realizes the black dragon is Lastismoon, the daughter of Drime and Grafaloon. The dragons land and take on their human forms. Grafaloon aggressively accuses Drime of having an affair because he constantly sneaks out of their castle at night and steals valuable treasures from their vault. She explains that she followed him to the village to catch him in the act and was fully prepared to burn the settlement to the ground. Hiraku quickly clears up the misunderstanding by explaining that Drime only brings those treasures as diplomatic gifts. He adds that Drime only sneaks out to get drunk with the villagers because he is afraid of his wife. Grafaloon realizes her husband lacks the courage to cheat on her and apologizes to Hiraku for nearly attacking his home. However, Grafaloon also recognizes the terrifying military strength of the village. She privately tells Drime that she could not defend against Hiraku's magic attack earlier. She admits she only survived because Zabuton pulled her out of the way just in time. Not wanting to risk making the village an enemy, Grafaloon orders Lastismoon to stay in the settlement and monitor them. Lastismoon happily introduces herself as Lasti and agrees to work in the village. Hiraku tries to assign her to basic harvesting duties, but her immense dragon strength makes her completely unsuited for farm work. She accidentally crushes the tomatoes in her hands and blows up the apple trees with her magic. She also shatters all the plates while attempting to wash the dishes. Worse, the livestock are absolutely terrified of her lingering dragon aura, causing the cows and chickens to completely stop producing milk and eggs. Realizing she cannot do normal chores, Hiraku appoints Lasti as the official diplomat for the village. Her first test comes when a human merchant arrives to purchase fruit. Lasti greets the merchant and immediately transforms into her massive green dragon form. The merchant is absolutely terrified by the giant beast towering over him. Lasti aggressively offers to sell him strawberries, apples, pears, persimmons, and watermelon. The merchant is so completely paralyzed by fear that he instantly buys 10 boxes of everything without a single negotiation. Lasti turns back into her human form and proudly reports her success to Hiraku. Meanwhile, deep inside the demonic kingdom, the demon lord and his generals hold an emergency council meeting. They are in a total panic after receiving reports that the village has officially recruited a legendary dragon to their ranks. Gratz points out that the village's military power is growing out of control and insists they must monitor the situation closely. Beazle volunteers to send a spy and summons his daughter, Florum, to the throne room. He orders Florum to infiltrate the village and investigate their military might, but he strictly warns her to prioritize her own safety above all else. Florum confidently accepts the mission, claiming her magical abilities will easily protect her. She flies toward the village enveloped in a blue magical aura. She looks down at the farmlands and assumes it is just an ordinary settlement. However, the moment she lands at the front gate, she is greeted by Lasti. Florum instantly recognizes Lasti as the infamous legendary dragon and is absolutely terrified to be face to face with her. Lasti casually offers to show Florum around the village. Before they can begin the tour, Tia flies down and informs Lasti that a messenger from Howling Village has arrived. Lasti apologizes and leaves to handle the diplomatic issue. Florum takes the opportunity to sneak off and analyze the village's military strength on her own. As she creeps through the forest, she realizes the situation is far worse than her father described. She spots heavily armed lizardmen, beastmen, ogres, and dwarves all working together in perfect harmony. She then discovers the vampire Princess Lu and the Angel of Annihilation Tia casually chatting with each other near a large tree. Florum is completely shocked to see such legendary figures residing in one place. Her panic peaks when she spots 5 high elves living together, as they are widely known for being terrifying man-eaters. Her confidence as a magic user is completely shattered when she sees a pack of deadly inferno wolves and demon spiders working in unison. Florum sits on a tree stump and wonders what kind of absolute monster could possibly rule over such a terrifying army. While walking through the woods, she bumps into Hiraku, who is casually carrying a hammer over his shoulder. Seeing that he is just an ordinary human, Florum acts completely dismissive. She rudely tells him to leave her alone because she does not need help from a weak human. Later, she reunites with Lasti and asks about the village's leader. Lasti casually mentions that the mayor is the human she just met in the woods. Lasti also adds that Hiraku is strong enough to easily defeat Grafaloon in combat. Florum freezes in absolute horror as she realizes she just insulted the supreme ruler of the most dangerous village in the world. After officially joining the village as a resident, Floram tries desperately to make up for her terrible mistake. She helps Lasti with the cabbage harvest and acts incredibly nervous around Hiraku. She speaks to him with extreme politeness and constantly bows her head. Hiraku assumes she is just a very respectful girl and believes they are getting along perfectly. He has absolutely no idea that Floram is a spy who is living in constant terror of him. The village's unusual daily life continues when a slime that Tia brought in to purify the wastewater suddenly starts multiplying. Soon the settlement is crawling with slimes of various colors, from blue and yellow to green and black. Since they are harmless, Hiraku does not really pay attention to them at first. However, a major incident occurs when a single red slime somehow sneaks into the storage room and drinks an entire barrel of the village's precious alcohol. Lou, Leah, and Lasti discover the empty barrel and the bloated slime. They are absolutely furious that the creature consumed their entire supply of booze without permission and immediately demand a severe punishment. The girls drag the slime before Hiraku, declaring the creature guilty of a terrible crime. Lou eagerly suggests burning the slime to a crisp with her magic, while Hiraku nervously tries to steer them away from such violent options. Someone else suggests drying the slime out in the sun, and Senna proposes a short confinement. Hiraku points out that since it is just a simple slime, punishing it will not actually make it reflect on its actions or understand what it did wrong. The girls reluctantly realize he has a point, and the slime is officially acquitted of its crimes. After surviving the trial, the red slime starts popping up during the village feasts, eagerly joining the residents to enjoy the celebrations. As autumn rolls around, the weather cools down, allowing the villagers to focus on harvesting their fresh crops. Hiraku proudly presents baskets full of cabbage, radishes, carrots, and sweet potatoes. The bountiful harvest inspires him to cook a massive hot pot for everyone. He gathers various new mushrooms and vegetables, creating a hearty stew that the entire village loves. During the meal, Hiraku mentions that the hot pot is delicious, but would be absolutely perfect if they had some seafood. The girls are entirely unfamiliar with the concept of seafood, so Hiraku explains that he is thinking of things like cod, crabs, and monkfish. He adds that they could also use kombu to make a proper broth for a delicious chanko hot pot. Hearing about these incredible new flavors, the girls immediately get super motivated to find these ingredients. Leah quickly uses her magic to research the items, while Senna panics because she has never even seen the ocean before. Lasti is genuinely surprised by the idea of eating hard-shelled crabs. Floram steps in and informs the group that there is a major port town called Shishato City located within the demonic kingdom, directly south of their forest. She explains that the city handles a massive amount of ocean products and suggests they travel there to find the fish. Lasti volunteers to fly Floram over to the city so they can meet with a merchant Floram knows. The girls enthusiastically agree to handle the mission, and Hiraku happily watches them depart, thrilled to see how motivated everyone gets when it comes to good food. 3 days later, Lasti and Floram return to the village alongside a distinguished elderly merchant named Michael Gorun. Michael introduces himself as the president of his trading company and proudly presents several massive fish and a large supply of the requested kombu. He explains that fishermen usually throw the seaweed back into the ocean, but he arranged for his men to collect and dry it specifically for the village. Hiraku is extremely impressed by the merchant's efficiency. Michael then outlines 3 main goals for his visit. First, he wants to formally greet Hiraku and thank him for the business opportunity. Second, he proposes expanding their trade relations. Finally, he boldly requests to become the official government purveyor for the village, meaning he would handle all of their external trade negotiations. Hiraku and the girls listen carefully as Michael explains that the village produces incredibly enticing crops, and with his expertise, he can secure several times their normal value on the open market. He hands them a list of products his company trades, hoping to seal the deal. The negotiations go perfectly, and Hiraku feels relieved to have such a skilled merchant handling their business. However, as the meeting wraps up, Michael casually mentions that he would like to discuss trading the village's alcohol next. Lasti instantly transforms into her massive green dragon form and terrifyingly screams that he absolutely cannot have their alcohol. Michael is completely paralyzed by fear and immediately excuses himself. He climbs onto the back of a flying lizard man and flees the village as fast as possible. Hiraku and the girls are completely oblivious to his terror, assuming the meeting was a massive success and looking forward to their future profits. Meanwhile, Michael flies back toward his city, internally panicking about the horrifying creatures he just encountered. 3 days earlier, back in Shashado City, Michael is swamped with paperwork when his assistant informs him that some unexpected visitors are requesting a meeting. Initially, Michael wants to turn them away, but his sharp merchant intuition warns him that ignoring this group would be a massive mistake. He decides to meet them and is completely shocked to see Florum accompanied by Lasti and several heavily armed lizardmen. Michael recognizes Lasti as a notoriously dangerous dragon and internally panics over the massive risks involved in dealing with her. However, his fear completely vanishes the moment Lasti reveals the goods she brought to trade. She presents baskets overflowing with high-quality apples and other fruits that are incredibly rare and valuable in the demonic kingdom. Realizing the absurd amount of money he can make, Michael's greed instantly outweighs his anxiety. Lasti hands him a drawing of the sea creatures Hiraku requested, and Michael eagerly promises to acquire them. Driven by the promise of massive profits, he personally travels with the delivery group to the Forest of Death. However, upon arriving at the village, his excitement quickly turns to absolute terror. He realizes the settlement is guarded by legendary monsters, including giant demon spiders, killer angels, an inferno wolf, and a vampire princess. By the time Lasti threatens him over the alcohol, Michael's sanity is pushed to the absolute limit. Despite surviving the terrifying ordeal, he remains extremely excited about the immense wealth he will gain from trading with the village, even if the stress might literally kill him. Back in the village, Hiraku uses the newly acquired seafood to prepare a massive chanko hot pot. He carefully arranges the ingredients and serves the steaming dish to the eager villager. Everyone is completely mesmerized by the incredible flavors, and Hiraku is thrilled to finally eat real seafood again. He even considers asking Michael to bring shrimp and squid next time. The peaceful atmosphere is completely shattered a few days later when a massive white dragon suddenly appears in the sky above the village. The angel squad attempts to intercept the beast, but the dragon effortlessly brushes them aside and prepares to launch a massive magical attack on the forest. Hiraku watches the dragon acting extremely smug and decides he has had enough of these constant dragon attacks. He grabs a wooden spear and hurls it straight into the sky with immense force. The spear strikes the white dragon squarely in the head, instantly knocking the massive beast out of the sky. The dragon crashes violently into the forest, sending up a massive cloud of dust. When Hiraku investigates the crash site, he finds his inferno wolves surrounding a white-haired girl who is laughing nervously and raising her hands in surrender. Drime quickly arrives at the scene and frantically explains that the girl is his older sister, Hakuren. Hakuren is furious with Drime because he drunkenly promised to marry Lasti off to Hiraku. Since Lasti is Hakuren's niece and is 900 years younger than her, Hakuren cannot accept the fact that Lasti is getting a husband before she does. She admits she only came to the village to vent her frustration and see what kind of man Hiraku is. Hiraku is completely unimpressed by her petty jealousy and scolds her for causing so much trouble. He firmly orders Hakuren to clean up the mess she made in the forest, completely ignoring her status as an ancient dragon. Hakuren is forced to drag heavy logs around to repair the damage. Later that evening, Hakuren joins the village feast and immediately falls in love with the delicious food. She officially decides to stay in the village, much to Drime's exhaustion. Seeking some entertainment, Hakuren suggests they play a game of mahjong. She confidently challenges Hiraku, Drime, and Lasti to a match, but insists they make it interesting by playing a strip version of the game where the loser suffers total humiliation. Hiraku is extremely hesitant to force anyone into taking off their clothes, but Lasti confidently accepts the challenge, declaring that dragons never lose. The game begins, and things quickly spiral out of control for Hiraku. Despite his best efforts to play carefully, he loses round after round until he is stripped down to nothing but his pants. He watches in absolute disbelief as Drime and Lasti casually dominate the game. Hiraku begins to seriously suspect that the dragons are using telekinesis or some other form of magic to secretly alter the tiles. He checks the pieces but finds no solid evidence of cheating. Just as Hiraku finally builds a perfect hand capable of scoring a massive victory, Lasti suddenly reveals her winning tiles and completely crushes him. Hakuren and Lasti gleefully chant for Hiraku to take his pants off. Having been utterly defeated by the dragons, Hiraku accepts his humiliating loss. While the village enjoys their games, the leaders of the demonic kingdom are in a state of total panic. Demon Lord Galgardo, Beazle, and Randon receive horrifying reports that another ancient dragon has joined the village. They realize the settlement now possesses enough raw military power to conquer entire nations. Beazle urges the group to prepare their armies, but Galgardo is completely distracted by his own daughter's rebellious phase, complaining that she barely speaks to him anymore. The sheer stress of the situation finally breaks Randon. He silently writes a resignation letter, leaves it on his desk, and completely abandons his post, fleeing the castle to escape the impending doom. Meanwhile, Hiraku tries to find a productive role for Hakurin in the village. Unfortunately, she is incredibly lazy and constantly complains about doing physical labor. She literally gives up on digging holes after a single day. Eventually, Hiraku assigns her to be the village teacher. She stands in front of a chalkboard and teaches the Beastmen children how to read, write, and do math. However, she openly admits to the kids that she only wants them to get smart so they can do all of her work for her in the future. Hiraku realizes her motivation is terrible, but he accepts that she is at least doing something useful. Sometime later, a group of topless Lamia girls arrive at the village seeking an audience with Hiraku. They bow submissively and offer a large tribute of magical crystals and weapons, begging the villagers to spare their lives. Hiraku and Floram are completely confused by the situation. The Lamia explain that a pack of the village's young wolves and spiders recently wandered into a nearby dungeon and completely cleared it out of boredom. The terrifying display of power forced the Lamia to flee their homes in absolute panic. The young wolves return to the village wagging their tails, completely unaware of the trouble they caused and expecting praise for their actions. Hiraku feels incredibly guilty about the misunderstanding and decides to officially trade with the Lamia, offering them fresh crops in exchange for their magical crystal. The Lamia are overjoyed by the generous deal and quickly form a dedicated delivery service to transport goods for the village. Hiraku only makes one specific request, asking the Lamia to please wear some clothes when they visit the village, because their constant toplessness makes him incredibly awkward. With the Lamia handling the deliveries and Michael managing their external trade, the village's prosperity reaches incredible new heights. Hiraku and the girls proudly look over a map of their expanding territory, planning to plant even more crops to support their growing population. Unbeknownst to them, the massive increase in their activities is completely misinterpreted by the outside world. Deep in a distant castle, Princess Yuri and her advisors study a map and conclude that the village is rapidly amassing military might for a massive invasion. They firmly believe the village is holding Floram hostage and using her as leverage against the demonic kingdom. Determined to stop the perceived threat, Princess Yuri stands before her throne and officially orders her forces to gather. She vows to launch a massive military campaign to defeat the village and rescue Floram, setting the stage for a completely unnecessary war. Back in the Demon Kingdom, Beazle informs Floram that Princess Yuri is gathering troops and preparing to launch a military campaign against Hiraku's village. Floram is completely shocked and asks why Yuri would do something so absurd. Beazle explains that while Floram was away, 3 politically powerful noble girls named Rosalind, Klakasi, and Roaju filled Yuri's head with half-truths. Floram is furious that these 3 simpletons are causing so much trouble, especially since she has sent plenty of reports detailing how ridiculously powerful the village is. Beazle suspects the reports sounded so absurd that the nobles thought they were fake. Floram offers to go convince them to stop, but Beazle warns her that doing so would make her look like an enemy of the demonic kingdom. Instead, he tasks her with stopping the invasion without actually deploying the village's military forces, fearing that a real retaliation would result in the total destruction of their kingdom. Floram agrees to the plan and figures she just needs to show the invading army the massive difference in power to make them give up. The next day, Yuri's army of 300 men marches toward the forest. However, their advance is immediately halted when a massive magic beam blasts the ground right in front of them, creating a massive crater and a huge cloud of dust. The soldiers and the 3 noble girls are absolutely terrified and instantly surrender, begging for their lives before the battle even begins. Floram brings the 3 noble girls to Hiraku and explains that they had a sudden change of heart and are now ready to work themselves to death for the village. Hiraku finds it a bit strange since the girls look completely traumatized, but Floram insists they are just acquaintances of hers who want to move in. She then secretly warns the girls that if they do anything to harm the village, she will gladly have them disposed of. Yuri also tags along with the group, and Florem tells Hiraku that she is just an observer here to see how the village works. Florem specifically instructs the noble girls not to treat Yuri like a princess during their stay, and Yuri happily agrees, noting that it has been a long time since anyone just called her by her actual name. Florem then takes Yuri and the 3 noble girls on a grand tour of the village. They are amazed by the unique sights, marveling at the crops growing in the flooded fields and the massive wooden water wheel that operates entirely without magic. They are also incredibly surprised to see ripe apples growing on trees, as they are used to only seeing them at fancy castle parties. Seeing the incredible abundance of rare food, the 3 noble girls quietly begin whispering among themselves. They scheme to take over the village, believing it could become the biggest moneymaker for their kingdom. However, their ambitious plans completely shatter a few moments later. While exploring the area, they stumble upon the village's terrifying guardians. They freeze in absolute horror as they come face to face with the giant demonic spiders and the menacing inferno wolves. Their fear peaks when Lasti happily introduces herself as a dragon. Realizing that the village is protected by legendary monsters, the 3 girls accept that they are completely trapped and abandon all thoughts of rebellion. They promise to work as hard as possible to earn their keep and beg not to be disposed of. Florem puts them to work handling the town hall's massive pile of office paperwork. Despite their initial terror, the girls quickly adapt to their new lives. They realize that while the office work is difficult, the delicious food and the relaxing baths make it totally worth it. They also love the peaceful environment, which is completely free from the stressful political conflicts of the Demon Kingdom. Meanwhile, Yuri watches Florem playfully pet a terrifying inferno wolf and realizes how foolish she was to attack such a place. She admits to Florem that she was totally ignorant of the outside world and regrets trying to bring war to such a peaceful village. Florem points out that anyone who attacks the village will just get incinerated by a dragon. Yuri then gets emotional and yells at Florem for suddenly vanishing from the Demon Kingdom. She explains that they have been friends since childhood, and she felt completely abandoned when Florem stopped talking to her and started treating her like a stranger with all the formal princess titles. Florem apologizes for shutting her out and promises to keep her in the loop from now on. The 2 friends finally reconcile and head back to eat together. Over the next few weeks, Yuri completely immerses herself in the village lifestyle. She helps the Beastkin children harvest the crops, digs up root vegetables, and enjoys massive feasts with the rest of the residents. When it is finally time for her to return to the Demon Kingdom, Yuri thanks everyone for their hospitality. Sena gives her a wicker basket full of freshly baked bread made from the wheat they harvested together. Yuri gratefully accepts the gift and teleports away with Beezle. However, the 3 noble girls refuse to leave. They stubbornly stuff their faces with snacks and insist that they still have too much to learn and too much paperwork to finish. Hiraku happily lets them stay. Back at the Demon Castle, Demon Lord Galgardo notices that Yuri has changed since her return. He complains to Beezle that she has grown dignified and is suddenly very busy with politics, never making time to talk to him. He completely misunderstands the situation and furiously concludes that she must have found a man in the village. He erupts in a massive aura of dark magic and vows to tear the guy apart himself. Beezle nervously tells him to calm down, warning him that his overprotective attitude will just make Yuri hate him. Beezle then drags the angry demon lord away to attend a meeting. Meanwhile, back in the village, Hiraku organizes the pre-winter harvest and is amazed by the massive mountain of radishes and crops they collect. Since they have harvested way more than they can store, Lasti suggests sending the excess food to her father. Hiraku asks if they can send some to her grandparents as well. Lasti casually mentions that her grandfather is Emperor Dragon Doze, and her grandmother is Hurricane Dragon Raymalin. Hiraku is completely stunned by their terrifying titles but agrees to share the crops. Lasti flies off to deliver the food to Drime and then continues south to Shashado City to drop off goods for Michael. While she is there, Michael asks her to exterminate a sea monster that has been attacking trade ships. Lasti happily accepts the job and blasts the massive tentacled monster with a huge beam of magic. She returns to the village with the monster's tentacles as a reward. Hiraku recognizes the meat as octopus and eagerly uses it to cook a delicious seafood hot pot for everyone. Around the same time, Harem flies north to deliver her share of the crops to her family. On her way back to the village, she finds a group of dark-skinned mountain elves led by a girl named Ya. The elves are struggling to survive because food is becoming scarce in the mountains, so Harem brings them to Hiraku. Hiraku warmly welcomes them and offers them a place to live. Ya wants to prove her worth and proudly declares that her people are excellent hunters who eat meat and use fire. However, the moment she tries to hunt in the forest, she completely embarrasses herself by falling into one of the village's pit traps alongside a rabbit. She later falls into another trap with a wild boar. Feeling terrible about being useless, Ya offers to make pottery for the village instead. Hiraku helps her build a small kiln, but the local dirt is too poor, and their clay bowls shatter in the fire. Determined to succeed, Ya goes out to search for proper clay in the area. She eventually returns with high-quality earth and successfully crafts several large jars and cups, thrilling Hiraku with her excellent work. Sometime later, Ya reports that she found the entrance to a new dungeon up in the northern mountains. Hiraku agrees to send a survey team consisting of elves, lizardmen, and wolves to investigate, but he warns them not to do anything dangerous. While the team is out exploring, Hiraku finishes building the new men's bathhouse. He enjoys a relaxing soak in the hot water, noting that the dwarves and lizardmen will also use it, so he definitely did not build it just for himself. While he is relaxing, 3 of the female attendants try to sneak into the bathhouse, hoping to wash his back and get closer to him. However, Florem catches them in the corridor before they can reach him. She scolds them severely, warning them that they are the absolute lowest-ranking members in the village. She completely terrifies them with a deceptively gentle smile, telling them they cannot just sneak their way to the top by bypassing everyone else. The girls are paralyzed with fear and beg her not to dispose of them. Eventually, the survey team returns from the dungeon and reports that they found a blood viper inside. The elf girls instantly become extremely serious and demand to form an extermination party to hunt the monster. They aggressively explain that blood viper meat is incredibly valuable because it makes the body overflow with vitality, improves relations between husbands and wives, and helps couples conceive children. Ya gets incredibly embarrassed by the explanation, turning bright red and gasping in panic. Seeing how intensely the elves want the meat, Hiraku nervously suggests they talk it over with the whole village before rushing off to hunt the dangerous creature. As autumn fades and the cold weather sets in, Lu suddenly falls ill. She becomes completely bedridden, complaining of nausea and a slight fever. Hiraku rushes to her side, extremely worried, and tries to figure out how to make medicine for her. He notes that he has never actually tried mixing medicine for himself before. Lu assures him that it is nothing serious and she just needs some rest. However, Senna steps in and asks if Lu has been craving sour foods lately. Lu admits she has no appetite for regular meals but is perfectly fine eating tomatoes and sour fruits. Senna points out that someone in Howling Village had the exact same symptoms. Hiraku eagerly asks what happened to that person, hoping for a cure. Sina simply smiles and says that the village congratulated them on the baby. The realization hits Hiraku like a truck. He yells out in absolute shock as he finally realizes that Lu is actually pregnant. Following the news of Lu's pregnancy, the entire village goes into a joyous uproar. Hiraku makes sure to check on Lu every single morning to see how she is feeling. Lu sits in her room and tells him not to worry so much because she is doing just fine. Hiraku continues his daily routine, waking up only after the sun has completely risen. He does this intentionally because Anne and the other maids insist on waking up much earlier than him, and he wants to give them enough time to prepare without feeling rushed. During his morning rounds, he meets with the maids to get their daily reports. One of the horned maids informs him that the wine slime successfully snuck into the decoy barrel they left out the previous night and drank all the alcohol inside. Hiraku feels a bit conflicted about letting the slime drink the wine, but he concludes that their plan worked perfect. Breakfast is split into 3 separate groups because they can no longer fit everyone into the dining hall at the same time. Hiraku eats with the first group, enjoying a hearty meal of daikon radish, spinach, and cabbage soup, along with some smoked killer rabbit. Flora joins them at the table but looks completely exhausted, muttering numbers under her breath. Hiraku asks if she has been sleeping at all. Flora admits she has not made any progress on the miso production and pulls out a flask filled with a strange pink liquid, claiming she just needs to add more of it to the mixture. Hiraku strongly advises her to go get some sleep instead. The second breakfast group consists entirely of the maids, who quickly eat their share. The third group is reserved for anyone who misses the first 2 meals, which usually includes latecomers like Harem, who struggle to wake up on time. After finishing his breakfast, Hiraku receives a report from Gran Maria. She explains that a group of 3 killer rabbits tried to infiltrate the village the previous day, but Kuro and the other wolves quickly eliminated them. Hiraku notes that the rabbits never learn their lesson, but since the village uses them for meat, he is actually thankful for their constant attacks. He also observes that Gran Maria and the other angels are surprisingly lazy on their days off. They completely rely on Daga and the lizardmen to handle their laundry and chores, while Anne and the maids cook their meals. However, Hiraku doesn't mind their laziness because they work incredibly hard to keep the village safe when they are on duty. Hiraku then heads out to the fields to tend to his crops. He spots some strange, fuzzy black creatures resting on the leaves. None of the normal garden pests he knows exist in this world, but Kuro and the pups easily track these new bugs down. To deal with them, Hiraku transforms his almighty farming tool into a watering can. The water it produces magically eliminates the pests without harming the plants. The village's fields have expanded massively, making it difficult to check on everything, but Hiraku feels a deep sense of satisfaction seeing the eggplants, beans, and gourds completely ready for harvest. During lunch, Hiraku sits under a large tree and eats a bento box with Lu, Tia, and Daga. Having a meal in the afternoon is actually very uncommon in this world. When Leah and the High Elves first arrived, they were terrified that eating 3 meals a day would deplete the food reserves and get them kicked out of the village. Hiraku wants to ensure that no one ever has to worry about going hungry as long as they live there. While he eats, Daga approaches and asks for permission to increase the feed for the cows since they just gave birth to calves. Hiraku tells him to take care of it. One of the elves then mentions that their crop storage room is almost full and suggests selling the excess produce. Hiraku agrees and decides to consult Florim about the best way to sell the goods to Michael. After lunch, Hiraku returns to work. The growing population has helped immensely with the general farm work, but Hiraku still handles tilling new fields and planting new seeds himself. He uses his farming tool to magically grow a patch of yellow tulips and white narcissus within a brick border. He figures that adding some vibrant flowers will make the village feel more civilized. Aside from farming, the villagers constantly ask Hiraku to craft small wooden items for them. He uses his farming tool as a file to easily shape blocks of wood for the beastkin children to play with, feeling incredibly grateful for his magical abilities. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku decides to join the villagers for their combat training. Anne and the maids highly recommended holding regular practice sessions, especially since everyone eats so much. The maids worry that if they don't exercise, they won't be able to fit into their maid uniforms anymore. Hiraku watches the lizardmen, angels, and elves spar before deciding to test his own skills. He grabs a wooden training sword and forcefully strikes a wooden dummy, but he quickly runs out of breath. He realizes he is completely out of shape. One of the dark-skinned mountain elves steps up and demonstrates how to throw small daggers, perfectly embedding them into the dummy. Hiraku tries to do the same but completely fails. Figuring he is just terrible with normal weapons, he decides to use his almighty farming tool instead. He transforms it into a spear and launches a massive martial arts kick. The impact releases a blinding blast of magical energy that obliterates the dummy and shocks everyone watching. Hiraku nervously admits he has no idea when he would ever need to use that kind of destructive power. As the sun sets, everyone gathers in the dining hall for dinner. The maids serve a brand new dish consisting of honey-simmered killer rabbit. Hiraku takes a bite and finds it incredibly sweet. He asks the maids how confident they are in the recipe, and they admit they are only 20% confident. Hiraku nervously asks them to only serve dishes they are at least 50% confident in, but the head maid glares at him and strictly states that they cannot afford to waste any food. Hiraku quickly agrees and forces himself to finish the meal with a smile. During dinner, Florim reads a letter from Princess Yuri. Yuri requests more of the village's apples and asks Zabuton to make her another dress. Hiraku feels bad about giving Zabuton more work and plans to politely decline the request, but Florim insists that Zabuton actually loves making clothes for people. After dinner, Hiraku heads to the newly built men's bathhouse to wash up. He loves having the large hot spring mostly to himself, noting that he could never truly relax back when the entire village had to share a single bathhouse. However, his peaceful evening ends the moment he steps into his bedroom. He immediately feels eyes watching him from the shadows. He suddenly shouts for help, and 4 elf girls instantly pop out from hidden trapdoors in his walls, floor, and ceiling. Realizing their cover is blown, the elves quickly retreat back into their hiding spot. Hiraku tries to convince himself that they are just acting as bodyguards to keep him safe, but he vows to seal up all the hidden doors the very next day. The following morning, Hiraku visits the village's brewery. Donovan, Cross, and Wilcox are hard at work operating the distillation pot. Hiraku initially assumed that dwarves would just drink alcohol all day and be merry, but Donovan strictly forbids drinking on the job. He explains that a drunk worker could easily cause a catastrophic fire. When Donovan tastes a new batch of alcohol from a glass flask, he immediately deems it a failure and marks the bottle with a large black cross. However, he doesn't throw the bad booze away. He plans to distill it further and mix it with fruit juice to create something better. Impressed by their intense dedication, Hiraku agrees to Donovan's request to triple their grape harvest. Shortly after, Senna frantically runs up to Hiraku and reports that a strange man has entered the village. Hiraku is shocked that anyone managed to slip past Grandmaria and Zabaton without being noticed. They rush over to investigate and find a young man with long brown hair wearing a red coat. He is prostrating on the ground in front of the wooden shrine that holds Hiraku's carving. Lou recognizes the man immediately and happily calls out to him. The man is Vargriff, the progenitor of the vampires and Lou's grandfather. He explains that he is over 4,000 years old, but he uses magic to erase his own memories every couple of centuries to keep himself sane and feeling young. Vargriff apologizes for entering the village uninvited and explains that he was inexplicably drawn to the wooden statue of God. He reveals that he actually met God when he was first born, and the statue is a perfect likeness of the creator. Vargriff desperately wants to take the statue home, but Hiraku refuses since it belongs to the village. Seeing Vargriff completely devastated, Hiraku offers to carve a brand new statue just for him. Vargriff is absolutely thrilled and happily accepts the offer. After Hiraku finishes the new carving, Vargriff straps the massive bundle to his back. He refuses to pay for it, explaining that religious items are not meant to be sold. Instead, he promises to find another way to show his gratitude. He wishes Lou a safe delivery and departs. Vargriff returns to his grand temple and greets the elderly head priest. He orders the priest to replace their most famous and beloved statue of the creator with Hiraku's carving. The priest is shocked but complies. Vargriff also orders the priest to ensure that all the other temples quietly support and respect the Great Tree Village from now on. Back in the village, Hiraku suddenly sneezes, completely unaware of the massive religious shift he just caused. Shortly after, a massive package arrives from Vargriff. It turns out to be a magnificent black and gold grand piano, sent as a gift to celebrate Lou's pregnancy. Hiraku has the lizardmen move the heavy instrument into the dining hall. 3 of the Beastkin girls are incredibly excited to see such a rare instrument, noting that pianos like this are usually only found in massive temples. However, the moment Hiraku tells them they can play it, they completely panic. They realize the piano is so incredibly expensive and sacred that they are terrified of breaking it. They cry that their lives would be over if they damaged it and beg Hiraku to get them a cheap, beat-up piano to practice on first. Hiraku agrees and contacts Michael to purchase a standard practice piano for the village. Soon both pianos sit side by side in the dining hall. Floram and the girls from the Demon Kingdom already know how to play beautifully, and the other villagers eagerly take turns practicing on the new instrument. The village fills with constant music, but as Hiraku tries to sleep that night, he clutches his blanket and groans in frustration, desperately wishing they would stop playing the piano so late at night. Spring passes by, and the sun shines stronger each day over the village, bringing immense heat to the expanding fields. The crops are thriving, and Hiraku notes how much brighter and more colorful the eggplants and cucumbers look after soaking up the sunlight. He calls out to everyone that it is time for a lunch break, and the demi-human girls immediately cheer, completely starving after a long morning of farm work. Hiraku stays behind for a second to prune his massive tomato plants, wiping sweat from his forehead, while feeling incredibly proud of how much his farming knowledge has grown since he first arrived. He joins the others in the shade of the forest clearing, where Lou is resting comfortably under a white lace parasol. Hiraku tells her she needs to take breaks too and shouldn't push herself in her pregnant state, but she points out that she is already relaxing. She uses ice magic to cool her drink and explains that she is actually feeling much better. She mentions that the village girls advised her to get some light exercise to keep her body strong for the baby. Senna and the maids are extremely supportive, constantly checking on her and ensuring she is comfortable. The other girls are fascinated by her pregnancy, wondering what it feels like to carry a child. They compare the weight of her belly to carrying 2 heavy cabbages and eagerly offer to help her with anything she needs. Lu appreciates their kindness and admits her appetite has completely returned, but she confesses that the only thing truly bothering her is her inability to drink alcohol. This single complaint sends the entire village into a panic. Later, Tia and the Angel Knights dramatically kneel before Hiraku with pained expressions, begging him to sell off all the village's alcohol immediately. They explain that they are trying to give up drinking in solidarity with Lu, but the temptation is driving them completely crazy. Whenever they eat delicious fried food, they constantly crave a drink to go with it, and it feels like pure torture. Hiraku calms them down and flat out refuses to sell their alcohol supply. He explains that sake wine actually tastes significantly better the longer they age in their wooden barrels inside the stone cellar. He encourages them to tough it out now so they can enjoy even higher quality drinks later. This completely shifts their perspective, and they happily agree to wait. However, this sudden halt in drinking causes a huge misunderstanding with Donovan and the dwarves. Donovan approaches Hiraku, looking incredibly depressed, and asks if they did something wrong with the latest batch, because everyone suddenly stopped drinking. Hiraku realizes he never informed the dwarves about the alcohol ban and quickly apologizes while explaining the situation to them. Donovan is immensely relieved to hear that the villagers still love their booze. Hiraku suggests they slow down production, but Donovan insists they do the exact opposite, so they have plenty of perfectly aged wine ready for when everyone starts drinking again. As Lu's due date rapidly approaches, she stays inside the log cabin to avoid the strong sun. The villagers constantly visit her, showering her with gifts to keep her comfortable. Tia and the angels bring a glowing white flower from a snowy mountain that magically acts as an air conditioner to keep the room cool. One of the mountain elves presents her with a glass jar of rare medicinal herbs to boost her vitality. Lasty gifts her a magic recovery necklace straight from her father's treasure room. Anne bakes her a fresh caramel pudding on a wooden plate, while another elf makes her a good luck floral wreath. Flora even cooks up a special tomato and tofu miso soup, which Lu finds surprisingly delicious. Daga visits and genuinely offers Lu his own blood so she can grow stronger, but she politely declines, joking that her teeth could never pierce his tough scales. Finally, Donovan sends over a mysterious gift. He gives her a wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon, telling her to trust him and that it will come in handy later. Hiraku looks at the mallet in pure confusion, wondering why on earth anyone would need a wooden mallet for childbirth. That evening, as the sun sets, Lu clutches her stomach and tells Hiraku that the baby is coming. The entire village immediately goes into emergency mode. Anne and the maids rush around the lodge, frantically boiling pots of water and carrying massive stacks of fresh white towels. Hiraku is forced to wait outside the room, pacing nervously as he listens to Lu's pained gasps. He feels completely helpless, knowing there is absolutely nothing he can do to ease her pain. Unable to sit still, he steps outside into the cool night air and gazes out at the dense forest under the glow of the 2 moons. He reflects on his incredible journey, remembering his very first night in this world when he stood in this exact spot, wanting nothing more than to live completely alone. Now he is surrounded by a massive family and friends who rely on him. He waits anxiously all night until the sun finally comes up. Sina and the maids emerge from the room with joyful smiles, announcing that the delivery was a success, and both mother and child are perfectly healthy. Hiraku rushes into the room, his eyes wide with emotion as he sees Lu resting on the bed. She is exhausted but beaming with happiness, gently cradling a newborn baby boy wrapped in a soft white blanket. She invites Hiraku to hold him, and he carefully takes the infant into his arms, nervously making sure to support his tiny neck. Hiraku is surprised by how warm and heavy the baby feels. The baby wiggles and flashes a small smile, completely melting Hiraku's heart. He realizes he has officially become a father. Thinking back on his previous life, which was consumed by severe illness and constant hospital stays, Hiraku vows to raise his son to be incredibly strong so he never has to experience that kind of suffering. Lu agrees, promising they will raise him together, and they decide to name the boy Alfred. A week later, Hiraku is back to working in the fields. He looks out over his thriving garden and the numerous buildings that now make up the Great Tree Village. He thinks about how much the settlement has expanded from a single massive tree into a bustling community, and he feels incredibly grateful for everyone's hard work. Wanting to properly thank the villagers for their dedication, Hiraku calls a meeting with the girls and introduces a brand new system. He pulls out a small pouch and presents a silver coin stamped with a tree emblem, calling it a reward medal. He explains that as the village's population continues to skyrocket, it is becoming utterly impossible for him to personally manage and distribute all the food and resources to everyone. He wants to transition the village to a formal currency system so they can handle their own transaction. The girls are confused at first, wondering why they can't just barter with goods. Hiraku explains the concept of subjective value, pointing out that everyone values items differently. He uses the example of debating how many strawberries equal one apple, or how a dragon values an apple compared to a barrel of gold. Using currency standardizes everything. However, to prevent sudden economic chaos, he introduces these medals as a trial run, acting as convenient vouchers they can exchange for whatever they want. He gives 3 medals to every single villager, and hands 30 medals each to Kuro and Zabuton to distribute among their massive families. The villagers react to the new currency in wildly different ways. Some immediately rush to the tavern to trade their medals for wine, while others exchange them for shiny new weapons from Drime. Some simply place the medals on stands and use them to decorate their rooms. However, a large portion of the village uses their medals to place custom orders for furniture and toys. This sparks a massive crafting boom, completely backfiring on Hiraku. He is forced to work furiously as a carpenter, chopping wood and building tiny stools non-stop just to keep up with the demand. Senna even uses her medals to jokingly rent Hiraku for an entire day, proudly riding on his shoulders while the other beastkin children run around them. Shortly after the currency trial, the village throws a massive outdoor feast to officially celebrate Alfred's birth. The tables are loaded with delicious food, and the entire village is ready to party. Lasty playfully balances a wooden mug on her head while Daga and the elves cheer her on. Hiraku and Lu stand proudly on a wooden stage next to a giant barrel of wine specially brewed by Donovan for the occasion. Lu finally realizes what Donovan's wooden mallet is actually used for, and together she and Hiraku smash the barrel open. The crowd goes wild, and the drinks start flowing endlessly. Hiraku enjoys the lively atmosphere, amazed that he is cracking open a celebratory wine barrel in another world. Donovan approaches and asks Lu how the wine tastes, but she regretfully explains that she still can't drink anything while she is breastfeeding Alfred. She insists she is perfectly happy just watching everyone else have a good time. Unwilling to let her miss out, Donovan gets a brilliant idea. He decides to immediately bottle the rest of the special wine so it can age perfectly until Alfred is old enough to drink it himself. He frantically orders his assistants to pack it away before the drunken villagers consume every last drop. Hiraku completely supports the idea, eagerly looking forward to the day he can finally share a drink with his grown son. Suddenly, they notice Flora acting extremely strange. She is completely enamored with baby Alfred and drunkenly claims that she wants to be Alfred's baby instead. The others quickly intervene, stopping her from getting too crazy with the infant. Meanwhile, news of Alfred's birth reaches the Demon Kingdom. Inside a grand meeting hall, Demon Lord Galgardo discusses the situation with his generals, Beazle and Randon. They all agree that after seeing the village's power and growth, challenging them is completely out of the question. Beazle suggests their best option is to maintain amicable relations by marrying someone from the Demon Kingdom into the village to permanently guarantee their safety. He nominates Galgardo's daughter, Princess Yuri, for the political marriage, but Galgardo furiously slams his hands on the table and screams that he will never hand his daughter over to anyone. At the same time, Michael the merchant receives the news and quickly organizes a massive shipment of goods. He wants to ensure his trading company stays on excellent terms with the village and prepares to congratulate Hiraku properly. Back in the village, Hiraku is approached by Tia and Leia. They inform him that both Drime and Beazle have contacted them regarding large groups of refugees who recently lost their homes due to the ongoing wars with the Fullheart Kingdom. The refugees are desperately searching for a new place to live, and they want to know if the village can take them in. Hiraku asks for a rough estimate of how many people are coming, and Tia nervously admits the number easily exceeds 100. Hiraku is completely shocked by the sheer volume of refugees, realizing their current infrastructure cannot possibly support that kind of sudden population boom. He states that they would essentially need to construct an entirely new village just to house everyone. Leah happily agrees with him, suggesting they literally just build a second village for the newcomers. The other girls enthusiastically throw their support behind the idea. They point out that the Great Tree Village saved all of them when they were struggling, so they have a moral obligation to help others in need. Touched by their intense determination and willingness to work, Hiraku agrees to the massive undertaking. He decides to call it Great Tree Village 2 and immediately calls a meeting to start figuring out the logistics of building a brand new settlement from scratch. With the sudden realization that over 100 aspiring immigrants are heading their way, the entire village immediately kicks into high gear. Everyone pitches in to prepare for the massive influx of refugees, even getting so carried away that they hold a full rehearsal with welcome banners and forced smiles before Hiraku points out they might be overdoing it. Recognizing that their current settlement cannot possibly house everyone, Hiraku officially declares that they will build an entirely new village specifically for the immigrants. To prioritize preparations, the head maid Anne focuses on making preserved foods using ingredients that spoil quick, resulting in a new lunch menu of vegetable-stuffed pita bread. Hiraku decides to deliver these easy-to-eat lunches to the civil servant girls at the village office, knowing they are completely swamped with work. Inside the office, Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakasi are practically buried under towering stacks of paperwork, desperately trying to keep track of the rapidly accumulating food and supplies. They are completely exhausted and on the verge of throwing up from the stress. Thankfully, Florem arrives with reinforcements from the Demon Kingdom. She brings in a group of female students who are eager to help, believing the administrative experience will give them an edge in high society. One of the students is absolutely shocked to see Florem alive, revealing that everyone back home thought she died after being attacked by a lamia. Florem quickly brushes off the rumor and puts the girls to work organizing the documents. After completing their tasks, the students are rewarded with a feast and the chance to pet Zabuton and the direwolves, though the intimidating creatures initially leave the girls terrified. Meanwhile, Gramaria finishes scouting the surrounding area from the sky and reports that she found no immediate dangers. Hiraku takes a high elf to scout a potential site for the new settlement. They decide to place the new village downstream and across the river as a defensive measure, just in case the new immigrants ever decide to start a rebellion and try to take over the main water supply. They find a prominent tree to serve as a central landmark and immediately start clearing the land to forge a path between the two villages. The High Elves and the Lizardman Daga attempt to chop down the massive trees in the area, but their weapons bounce right off the incredibly hard wood. Stepping up to the task, Hiraku summons his omnipotent farming tool, transforming it into an axe. He effortlessly slices through the thick trunks with single strikes, leaving the others completely astounded by his power. With the land cleared, they construct a sturdy wooden bridge across the river, making sure not to build it too wide so that large monsters cannot easily cross it. They also dig a canal from upstream to create a reservoir and set up a massive material processing site to handle all the lumber. Daga notes that they are making incredible progress, but they still need to process a ton of wood to meet the construction demands. Hiraku tells Daga to take a break while he continues working. During his downtime, Hiraku carves a detailed wooden statue of Zabuton to let off some steam, though he wishes he had made it bigger. Lou stops by carrying baby Alfred and playfully scolds Hiraku for working during his break, forcing him to finally sit down and rest. Once the materials are prepped, the construction phase begins. The High Elves and Lizardmen work together to assemble the wooden houses based on the blueprints they prepared in advance. The elves use their magic to effortlessly lift massive wall frames and roof beams into place, drastically speeding up the process. Hiraku watches them work and remembers how much he struggled to build his very first tiny hut all by himself without any nails, carrying every plank by hand. He feels incredibly grateful for the community he has built. During the construction, Anne and the maids bring out hot soup and rice for the workers to keep their energy up. The site gets a bit chaotic with the elves tossing heavy wooden boards to each other across the rooftops, prompting Hiraku to establish strict safety rules against throwing lumber. Thanks to everyone's combined efforts, the new village quickly takes shape, but Hiraku still worries about the exact number of people arriving. Suddenly, Grandmaria flies in with an urgent message from the gatekeeper dragon Drime. She warns Hiraku that Drime is bringing the immigrants over right now and tells him to get ready. Dream teleports into the village in a panic, explaining that the situation was far more urgent than he anticipated, and he had to move faster than his messenger wyvern. He introduces the first group of immigrants as Minotaur. Hiraku expects them to look like typical cow-headed monsters, but Gordon, the Minotaur representative, steps forward and reveals they are actually massive, muscular demi-humans with horns, standing well over 2 meters tall. Gordon explains that they were driven out of their home village and stranded on the road until they were rescued. The group consists of 72 people, including many starving children and injured adults. Hiraku immediately cuts the introduction short and orders the maids to serve them warm porridge. As the Minotaurs eat, Hiraku worries about their dietary restrictions, admitting he knows nothing about Minotaur habits. The lizardman Nerf steps forward, explaining that he used to live alongside Minotaurs in his old village, and volunteers to gather their opinions on food and living conditions. Hiraku eagerly accepts his help. While the Minotaurs finish their meals, Hiraku and Gordon go to inspect the newly built houses in the second village. However, they quickly realize a massive problem. The houses were built for normal-sized people, and the Minotaurs are far too large to even fit inside the doors. Realizing the new village is completely useless for them, Hiraku is forced to temporarily house all 72 Minotaurs in the large guest house back in the main village. Before he can even process the housing crisis, Florim receives a magical message from her father, Bezel. Bezel exhausted himself using repeated teleportation magic to evacuate another large group of refugees, and is sending them over immediately. Hiraku urges Bezel to rest, noting that he is not young anymore, before turning his attention to the new arrival. To his surprise, the second group consists of 100 half-human, half-horse centaurs. Their representative, a centaur named Gruwald, impatiently demands to know why they are being kept waiting. Hiraku politely introduces himself as the village chief, but Gruwald completely dismisses him. She boasts that she is a relative of the senior steward of the Viscount Beeg family from the Demon Kingdom, and demands to be treated with aristocratic respect. Hiraku is completely clueless about noble etiquette and feels overwhelmed by her haughty attitude. Fortunately, the civil servant girl Lashashi steps in to handle the situation. She introduces herself as the second daughter of Count Droy from the Demon Kingdom. Upon hearing her high-ranking title, Gruwald realizes she is severely outranked and immediately panics. Lashashi firmly reminds Gruwald that she is a refugee asking for help, and this village is not a domain being handed to her. Thoroughly intimidated, Gruwald drops to the ground and begs for mercy, apologizing for her rudeness. Lashashi formally volunteers to take charge of the centaurs and keep them in line, assuring Hiraku that her family back in the Demon Kingdom is safe from the ongoing war. With the centaurs humbled, Hiraku takes Gruwald to the second village to show them their new homes. Once again, they hit a brick wall. The centaurs' massive horse bodies make it completely impossible for them to fit inside the small wooden cabins. Gruwald desperately asks Lu if she can use magic to shrink the centaurs down to human size, but Lu explains that her shrinking magic is unique to her vampire bloodline and cannot be cast on others. With the main guest house already packed with minotaurs, Hiraku has no choice but to rent out space in the village cowsheds and the southern dungeon with the lamias to temporarily house the 100 centaurs. Exhausted by the housing disasters, Hiraku wonders if any more giant demi-humans are going to show up. Almost on cue, a group of identical green-haired women arrives at the village. The Lamias found them wandering aimlessly through the dangerous forest and escorted them to safety. Their representative, Igu, steps forward carrying a small smiling tree stump with a simple face. She introduces her people as the New Daphne, a race of tree spirits. She explains that they survived the monster-filled forest by transforming into trees to hide, which is why Igu carries the tree stump as a portable disguise. Igu tells Hiraku that their hometown was destroyed by severe flooding caused by excessive logging. They heard about the Great Tree Village from the merchant Michael and made the dangerous trek across the Death Forest on their own. Hiraku warmly welcomes them and immediately asks what kind of food they want for a welcome banquet, offering to get them fresh fruit. Igu politely declines the food, explaining that tree spirits only need clean water, bright sunlight, and good dirt to survive. The New Daphnes step onto a freshly tilled farming plot, admiring the rich, fragrant soil. Within seconds, a beautiful white flower magically blooms from the tree stump's branch to signify its satisfaction with the environment. Thrilled that he does not have to worry about feeding them, Hiraku eagerly offers to show them to the houses in the second village. However, the new Daphnes firmly reject the offer. They insist that they must stay outdoors to absorb sunlight and rain, completely refusing to live inside a building. Night finally falls over the Great Tree Village, and the housing situation is a complete mess. The 72 minotaurs are crammed into the main village buildings, the 100 centaurs are sleeping in the cow sheds and dungeons, and the new Daphnes are literally just standing motionless out in the dirt fields under the moonlight. Meanwhile, the newly constructed second village sits entirely completely deserted. Inside the main lodge, the elf girls and civil servants collapse on the floor in utter exhaustion, realizing that all their hard work building the second village was completely pointless. Despite their fatigue, they refuse to give up. They immediately start brainstorming new architectural designs, determined to build massively upscaled houses that can properly accommodate the towering minotaurs and the bulky centaurs as quickly as possible. Hiraku gets the representatives of the new immigrant groups together in the office to apologize for not having their permanent homes ready yet. Gordon the Minotaur, Gruwald the Centaur, and Igu the new Daphne all drop to their knees and act super subservient. Gruwald even dramatically claims that she is just a flake of dust in his presence. Hiraku awkwardly tells them to relax and drop the formalities, since they all live together now. To help everyone adjust, he assigns some of his own villagers to look after them. He pairs the lizardman Narf with the Minotaurs, the Count's daughter Lashashi with the Centaurs, and the beastkin Mam with the tree spirits. Mam confidently introduces herself, mentioning she moved from Howling Village and got recommended by Senna. Hiraku then explains that the main village is built for normal-sized people, so the giant minotaurs and centaurs won't fit. He announces his plan to build 2 brand new villages just for them using the spots Leia and the High Elves scouted out earlier. He asks everyone to pitch in and clear the dense forest to make roads. The dragons Lasti and Hakarin jump at the chance to help. Lasti fires a massive magical beam that completely vaporizes a huge chunk of the forest, while Hakarin kicks a tree and shatters it into splinters. Freaking out over the insane destruction, Hiraku quickly tells them to dial it back before they wipe out the entire area. They calm down and start working along the river instead. Daga and the lizardmen dig the dirt while the high elves stack heavy logs for walls. Lasti uses her magic to slice logs perfectly, while Hakarin just eats an apple and complains about the work, wishing she could just burn everything. Meanwhile, Zabaton knits some clothes for Hiraku and Lou's baby Alfred, but the outfits end up being way too big. Over at the site for the second village, Hiraku and the crew focus on the Minotaurs. Since the Minotaurs are huge, they build one-story houses with extremely high ceilings and craft oversized furniture to match. Hiraku even designs a special bed with a gap at the headboard, so the Minotaurs can sleep without their horns getting stuck. Gordon tests it out and immediately falls asleep. For the third village, Hiraku builds homes for the centaurs. Because of their horse bodies, the houses look like large stables with wide entrances. Gruwald asks about doors, and Hiraku explains that since centaurs struggle with normal doors, he is installing pull-cord curtains and sliding doors for rainy days. A month flies by and both villages are finished just before winter hits. Hiraku sits down with Lou, Tia, and the civil servant girls to pick official names for the settlements. He initially thinks of naming them Upton, Middleton, and Downton, but quickly changes his mind. Not wanting to deal with the nightmare of rewriting all their administrative paperwork, he decides to just call them Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3. Everyone agrees to leave Village 1 empty for now, while Gordon is named Mayor of Village 2, and Gruwald becomes Mayor of Village 3. The girls suggest giving Hiraku a fancy title like King Mayor or High Mayor to show he is in charge, but he shuts the idea down immediately. Soon after, the fox girl Senna comes by carrying a small new Daphne tree stump and asks when they are building a village for the tree spirits. Hiraku explains they aren't building one because the tree spirits prefer to stay planted in one spot. The stump's face turns sad, so Hiraku quickly adds that he has a very important job for them. Since the Daphnes can talk to each other telepathically, he plans to scatter them across the settlements to act as an instant communication and warning network. They also glow in the dark, making them perfect natural streetlights. Everyone agrees to let some of the tree spirits watch over the empty Village 1, so the buildings don't go to waste. With the housing sorted out, Hiraku tries to hand out daily jobs to the new residents, but he immediately hits a wall. He realizes neither the minotaurs nor the centaurs can hunt in the forest. The minotaurs are way too peaceful, and the centaurs are mostly refugees with zero combat skills. Hiraku watches a normal forest rabbit easily dodge the villagers, and realizes he totally underestimated how hard hunting actually is. He admits he only thought it was easy because Kuro's wolves do all the work with their insane strength. To keep everyone safe, Hiraku bans the newcomers from entering the deep woods and stations wolves and giant spiders in the new villages as guards. Hoping to make the villages self-sufficient, he tells the minotaurs and centaurs to focus entirely on farming. They eagerly till the soil and plant seeds, but nothing grows. Hiraku asks if they planted the seeds in the right season, but nobody knows. He then realizes his almighty farming tool made him blind to normal farming. Since his magical tool instantly fertilizes dirt and forces crops to grow no matter the weather, they never actually learned traditional farming. Now that they have to farm normally, everyone is lost. Luckily, Gordon steps up and mentions he used to help with farm work back in his old village. Following Gordon's lead, the villagers cover the dirt with straw to protect it from the cold and plant winter wheat. Knowing it will take 6 months to harvest, Hiraku accepts the long wait and carves wooden statues of the god of creation and the god of agriculture to bring good luck to their crops. He puts them in a small shrine by the central tree. Gordon and Daga check out the statues and note that different places have different ideas of what gods look like, especially since Hiraku made the agriculture god look like an old man. While the minotaurs handle the slow farming, the centaurs use their speed to start a delivery service between the villages. They pull wooden carts full of supplies and easily outrun any monster. 2 centaurs run so fast they set a new speed record, but they end up crashing their cart and sending a slime flying into the air. Hiraku watches the wreck and hopes they start caring more about safety. Seeing the centaurs run around makes Hiraku want to try horseback riding. He walks up to a normal black horse on his farm and offers it a carrot, but the horse completely ignores him. Gruwald sees him struggling and offers to help. Even though she can't actually speak to the horse, she uses her aura to calm it down. She gets on the horse first and tells Hiraku to sit behind her and hold her shoulders. Suddenly, the horse takes off at blinding speed, leaving a trail of magic and giving Hiraku a wild first ride. A few days later, Hiraku tries again. This time, the black horse is in a great mood and lets him mount it without any issues. He calmly rides it across the field. Gruwald spots them from behind a cabin and gets incredibly jealous. She marches over, points at the horse, and angrily calls it a dangerous beast. She demands that Hiraku ride on her back instead. Hiraku waves his hands to calm her down, realizing she is just jealous. He promises to alternate his rides, agreeing to ride the horse one day and her the next. Later on, a maid walks up to a New Daphne stump and asks if it needs anything. The stump just says the sky is blue, and magically transforms into a cute little wooden creature. Elsewhere, Hiraku relaxes under a tree with Lou and their baby Alfred. He tells Lou he is worried about the village relying too much on his farming tool, fearing that if he gets sick, their entire food supply will crash. Lou smiles and tells him to stop stressing over things that haven't happened yet. She reminds him he isn't retiring anytime soon, so he should just enjoy the peace. Hiraku agrees, but their moment is interrupted when they realize Alfred needs a diaper change. Hiraku jokes that Lou handed the baby over just to make him deal with the smell. Despite the relaxed vibe, Hiraku's mind goes back to another big issue. The Great Tree Village is packed with women, and he really wants more men to balance things out. He checks the numbers with the newcomers. Gordon says 28 of the 72 minotaurs are male, but they only marry other minotaurs because of their size. Gruwald says 30 of the centaurs are male, but they are all little boys, since the adult men went off to war. Hoping for a loophole, Hiraku asks Gruwald if centaurs ever marry other races. Gruwald completely misinterprets the question and assumes Hiraku wants a centaur wife as payment for letting them stay. She blushes, clutches her chest, and dramatically offers herself to him, claiming that human men love overpowering strong women. Horrified by the mix-up, Hiraku frantically waves his arms and tries to explain that he absolutely doesn't want that, and was only asking about their culture. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and see you in the next video.